The Planning Commission meeting for the City of Wilmington for Wednesday, August 7th is called to order. Would you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please add to the minutes that Commissioner Collier and Commissioner Lennon have excused absences tonight. Mr. Attorney, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right. All matters requiring commission action shall be presented to the Planning Commission by the planning staff and the applicant. In situations where planning staff is the applicant, there will be only one presentation. City staff will make the first presentation. The applicant will make the second presentation. Both presentations are limited to 5 minutes each. To maintain an orderly meeting, all presentations shall proceed without interruption unless the commission desires to intervene with questions or comments. The chair will open the public hearing for those physically present wishing to speak about an item. Those in favor of an item should be heard first, followed by those opposed to an item. A 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in favor of an item. A 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in opposition to an item. A staff member will track the 10-minute time periods, and I believe we have Ms. Painter on the job tonight. Thank you. Track the 10-minute time periods and will notify the speaker at their 5-minute mark, the 1-minute mark, and verbally call time when it expires. The chair, in their discretion, may extend these time periods. All groups, organizations, neighborhoods, or similar associations desiring to comment are asked to appoint one spokesperson to present their concerns or point of view to the commission on each agenda item. The public has been encouraged to submit their comments in writing via a web-based form located on the City of Wilmington's website. All comments received prior to 3 p.m. today were forwarded unedited to the Planning Commission. All comments received will be delivered to City Council when the item advances. All comments received will be made available to the public if requested. All votes will be voice votes after proper motions are made and consistency statements are read into the record. The chair will state the outcome of the vote and the action. Rezoning requests that receive an unfavorable recommendation from the Planning Commission may be appealed by the applicant to the Wilmington City Council. Appeal should be in the form of a letter submitted to the city clerk within 10 days of this hearing. Any items being appealed will tentatively be heard by the City Council on September 17th. Okay, Commissioners, you had the minutes from July 10th in your packet. Do we have any comments on those?
Without objection, I'll just make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Commissioner Kofer has moved to approve the minutes from July 10th. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, our first item of business is a general rezoning of property containing 0.13 of an acre located at 418-420 McCrae Street from CB, Community Business, and R5 to Medium Density Mixed Residential District to R3, Medium High Density Mixed Residential District. And Mr. Smith is here to present our staff report.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. This is public hearing number 1, general rezoning of 418 and 420 McCrae Street. The site is located at the intersection of McCrae Street and Rankin Street. The site is 0.134 of an acre and is currently vacant. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request, as well as photos of the subject site. These are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property. These are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. Residential uses are located to the north, south, east, and west of the site. The sites are currently zoned CB, Community Business District, and R5, Medium Density Mixed Residential District. The sites are bordered by CB and R3 to the north, R5 to the east and south, and HDR and R3 to the west. The subject property is located within a neighborhood-scale infill development area of opportunity on the Comprehensive Plan's Growth Strategies map. Neighborhood-scale infill development principles place particular emphasis on surrounding neighborhood fabric and focuses on small lot infill development, especially single-family residential. Both lots are approximately 2,920 square feet in size, which is less than the 5,000 square foot requirement for R5 zoning. The lots also don't meet the lot width requirements for R5 or CB zoning districts. The proposed R3 zoning would allow the lots to become conforming. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and that the request is reasonable and in the public's interest. Staff recommends approval. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Do we have any questions for the staff at this time? Commissioner Pollock? You turn your mic off.
Well, I figure my voice was so darn loud anyway. Zach, quick question. I'm not a general fan of general rezoning, but I kind of look at this one and I'm trying to pick it apart and I can't. So, I mean, there you are. The only question I have is clarification on 2.3.2 in the staff report where it comes down. And I realize in a general rezoning, there's no community meetings, there's no plan or anything like that. So maybe this is just semantics, but in 2.3.2 in the second and third bullet, it says the plan places particular emphasis on surrounding neighborhood. The plan focuses on a small lot infill. Is that just standard language in our code, or I mean, you know, what plan is it referring to, if anything?
I think for this particular case, the request does fit the surrounding area. Most of the area is residential by nature. So I believe that's.
The plan is the comprehensive plan.
I'm sorry?
The plan is the comprehensive plan.
That's the plan, that's what it's referring to?
yeah,
Okay.
referring to that.
That's all I wanted to be clear on. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, thank you. And we have an applicant here.
Good evening, thank you. My name's Cindy Wolf, and I'm representing the owner and potential developer of this. And in fact, that developer is the same developer that is doing the townhomes just half a block up McCrae Street. And so we've got an unusual situation with the corner lot being zone commercial, and this entire block is residential. So as far as the general rezoning, it certainly makes sense as an infill to create the residential rather than that small block of commercial being the single lot. That being said, we believe that we've got a nice product that's going on up the street. To put that product on these lots, the R3 was necessary because of the difference in setbacks. And so everything will be fairly consistent. I'd be happy to answer your questions, but the justification of it is certainly that the whole block itself is residential, and trying to squeeze some type of a commercial use on this corner lot would just not make any sense.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Thanks so much.
Commissioner Cofer?
Sorry.
Madam Chair, sorry. Ms. Wolf, one thing that these are one or two lots of record?
There are two lots,
Two lots?
yes.
With a 33?
Well, right now, yes, there's two lots.
Two lots of record? 33 feet width each?
That's correct.
Is there
Our
some-
intention is, but it's not conditional, obviously, our intention is to build two individual homes, bring them the access from Rankin, just like the other project up the street,
Right.
with a rear load, and address the street. But that being said, as it sits, it would support a duplex.
Any reason from your experience with the history of Wilmington why 33 was the magic number for the width of these?
Oh, that's the old city block system.
That was-
Blocks were 660 foot by 666, I think, or something like that, in the original 1945 block plan. And so generally speaking, any lot that is a piece of the original is generally 33 foot wide.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
I guess, 20 times 33.
Thanks. Commissioner Adams?
Are you planning to, excuse me, recombine these into one parcel or keep them as two separate parcels just with consistent zoning?
That's what I was saying. Our intention is to keep them separate, put individual homes on each one.
Okay.
But in all, transparency, with what's going on, it would support a duplex if it was recombined. But that's not our intention.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing for agenda item number 1. Anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item number 1, come to the podium and start with your name and address. Okay, anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item number 1? Anyone here to speak on agenda item number 1? All right, the public hearing is closed. Any comments on this, Commissioner Adams?
I mean, I think this is a great site, that we need to look at these types of sites for, infill housing. To me, this is only coming before us because it's an unfortunate resultant of overlapping, zonings that, prohibit, again, I think some reasonable infill development. So this is exactly, I think, the kind of urban infill project that I think that we should be supporting.
I would agree with Commissioner Adams, and this is a very appropriate use of general rezonings, which is a testimony to Commissioner Pollack, who's not in favor of them in general. So any other discussion on this one? Commissioner Cofer?
Or a comment than discussion, but one thing to Commissioner Pollack's question on a straight rezoning, we're not going to have a community meeting, but in this particular case, we did actually see this last month, I believe, where the applicant had a similar project that was a conditional district rezoning. So we got to hear some input from the community. I'm unabashed at saying I'm a firm supporter of commercial, and I don't like to see an erosion of commercial, albeit this is probably not the site for community business to continue, but just to put it out there on the record, I'll be in favor of this straight rezoning, but an erosion of commercial in support of residential, that there has to be a balance there. So just to put that out as a comment more than a discussion topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cofer. All right, what's the will of the commission?
I'm prepared to make a motion
Great.
to further surprise everybody.
Let's let you do it.
I make a motion that we support agenda item number 1, which is the 418 and 420 McCray Street rezone from R5 to and CB to R3. I recommend approval. This request is consistent with the objectives and the policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington. The Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest, and the proposal would allow for residential development that is consistent with the surrounding zoning and lot sizes.
Thank you. Commissioner Pollack has moved to approve agenda item number 1. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Adams with a second. Further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving agenda item 1, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, the motion, let's see, there's 5 of us. The motion passes 5-0. All right, our second agenda item is a conditional district rezoning of properties containing 6.56 of an acre located at 507, 509, 515, 519, 525, 529 South Kerr Avenue from R10 to MD17 for a 184-unit multi-dwelling development. And Mr. Mahoney is here to deliver our staff report.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. As mentioned, the site is located on the east side of South Kerr Avenue, just north of Kimberly Way. It's approximately 6.56 acres in size and is currently occupied by single-dwelling structures. Here's a map showing the general vicinity surrounding the request, along with some photos of existing conditions on the subject site. These are photos of some more existing conditions, especially the surrounding roadway network along Kimberly Way and South Kerr Avenue. And here are some photos of adjacent land uses and properties surrounding the site. As mentioned, the site is located in an area that is zoned R10 residential. This portion of South Carr Avenue contains both R10 zoning along with MD17 multi-dwelling zoning, which is located to the west and to the south of the site. As mentioned, the applicant's proposing to rezone the site from R10 to MD17 CD conditional district for a 184-unit residential development. Here's the site plan proposed by the applicant. It consists of 3 multi-dwelling buildings containing a total of 184 units. This is about 28 dwelling units per acre. There are 56 one-bedroom units proposed, 80 two-bedroom units, and 48 three-bedroom units. The proposed MD17 does allow for 17 units an acre, however, excuse me, with a workforce housing component consisting of 10% of the total site. At an 80% area median income, the density may be increased to 36 units an acre. All of the units proposed within this development are considered to be workforce housing units, affordable to households with incomes between 30% to 80% of the area median income. And these limits would apply for a minimum of 30 years for this project. Additionally, the site is proposing preservation of the 5 specimen trees shown on the site plan there. You'll see the circles of the critical root zone of those shown as well. There is a driveway access proposed on South Carr Avenue along with Kimberly Way. I will qualify some of this site plan design. The city's land development code does allow for a project narrative and a bubble plan, a master plan type of site plan when a proposal includes 100% workforce housing units for at least 15 years. As mentioned, they're providing it for 30. So the applicant has provided this site plan, which is above and beyond the regular detail which would be required in that case, but they are still granted the flexibility of the narrative that is provided within the code. So they are granted some flexibility according to that. Of course, that wouldn't be with unit numbers and things like that. They would be locked into those numbers, but site design, there is some flexibility that's allowed. I just wanted to point that out. The subject property is adjacent to a live-work innovation zone on the Comprehensive Plan's Growth Strategies map. Areas well suited for infill development should be developed in a way that maintains or enhances the desired character, increases housing options, and improves overall quality of life in the vicinity. New development and density increases are encouraged for sites within close proximity to commercial services and employment centers, as well as transit routes, which one is located in front of this site as well. This proposal, it places workforce housing near these major services, institutions, and transit options, as mentioned, while preserving some of the specimen trees on site. Therefore, staff believes that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, that the request is reasonable in the public interest, and we recommend conditional approval with the conditions listed in the case summary. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant's team is here as well to help answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. Commissioner Woodruff.
Just real quick, the math. MD17, it said allowed for 17 units per acre. How many units would that have been?
That's a great question. I can get my calculator out if you like.
I don't care. Whatever way is easiest for you.
Yeah, sure.
Round it up.
About
I don't
6
care.
times 17.
111
111.
from down this way. Okay.
I'll trust the math.
Well, then I'll give you the next one. And now with the workforce housing component, it's up to 36 units per acre. What would be the maximum amount they could put on that lot? Is that more than what they're proposing now?
Yes, it is. They're around 28 units an acre with what they're proposing right now.
So they could have even made it more dense than it is. All right. And as I understand it, I mean, it says all the units are going under as workforce
That's correct.
housing. My compliments. All right. And this is only my comment. Carr Avenue cannot keep handling all this traffic, but it's not my job to say no. So thank you.
Commissioner Adams.
Good segue. Question about traffic. Given the level of service F, how far off from the, this density, how far off were we from, or is this project as proposed from triggering a TIA?
They have come in just under the requirements for a TIA. The requirements for TIA are 100 AM or 100 PM peak trips or 1,000 daily trips. I believe in my case summary, we have the estimated trip generation shown as 69 AM peak trips, 72 PM peak trips in the PM, and 831 daily trips. So it's under the threshold. It's my understanding, and I'll let the applicant speak to this, but they did perform an analysis. It was not required, but they have performed their own traffic analysis for this site. So I'll defer to them on some of those questions and what the analysis might have.
And this might not be a question that you could answer. Given the limited right-of-way in this section of Carr Avenue, is there any known ability or plans to enlarge or expand Carr Avenue similar to what's been done to the north?
There was a project that was on the NCDOT's State Transportation Improvement Plan, but it was not funded, so there are no plans at this time for widening. Though as that goes through its cycle, it may come up again for funding and for construction, but not at this time.
Do we know, and this is a hypothetical, but do we know if the site plan as proposed could, I'll say, theoretically allow for an expansion of right-of-way of Carr in the future?
I can't speak to that since there's no design plans that I'm aware of. I may defer to the applicant on some of that. I will say there is a city project for a multi-use plan or multi-use path that has been in the works and is currently under development, and the site, the design that you see in your packets includes the future multi-use path and the future right-of-way expansion that is going to happen with that project.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pollock.
Kind of to the traffic question, so basically what this, and I always make sure I say this, it says, you know, the net total difference plus 549, and I get the math underneath it, but that's 549 to where there's nothing today, correct?
That is plus 549 based on the potential build-out of the current zoning. So staff ran a hypothetical what they could do now under the current zoning.
I understand, but in reality, there's nothing there today, correct?
I believe there's a few single-family units.
So that takes me to my next question. So you're a great straight person. Does the developer own those buildings now? All the land that he wants to rezone, does he own any structures on there? Does he own those today?
I will defer to the applicant on that.
Okay.
They had property owner's signature. They have to have that to submit this. I don't know where they're at in the transaction
That's fair.
process.
So and the last question is, if I look at on page 2 of the package, there's only one in-out egress to the building, to the area. Do I see that right, or am I missing something?
Kimberly Way.
There's
one
a
on-
driveway located to the north on South Carr and on Kimberly Way as
So
well.
those are the two. So
Yes.
but on Carr, there's only one.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Cofer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few, and we'll probably bounce around as we learn more, but for starters, I think it'll be a great focus group whenever we run into a Carr Avenue case, who says Kerr and who says Carr.
I use both. I
That's
go back
right.
and forth to cover all bases.
Interchangeable. Something I just learned right now in real time, when a project, which is the first that's come in front of me during my tenure on this board, was a 100% workforce component, then it allows this, what you called a bubble plan or some grand flexibility. One thing I noticed is that in our packet, figure 2.1-A, the proposed site plan dated 7/19/24, isn't consistent with the site plans in the rear of the packet. To just educate me on this commission, of those of us that aren't aware of the flexibility for a 100% workforce versus what we generally see. Binding, I mean, again, in my line of questioning is going to be, these guys get in, or the applicant gets entitlement and they go on to sell the project down the road. You know, what is binding here?
Right. I believe, to answer the first part of the question, I think some of the earlier iterations of the site plan were probably shown at the community meeting, which is included in all of your packets. So when this project came through and was submitted for pre-TRC, That's when the discussion started about the multi-use path, which required some site design changes, which were then later incorporated into the design, which tweaked kind of the building layout and some other things on site to necessitate the shifting of the right-of-way and the incorporation of the multi-use path. With regards to the site plan, when there is a narrative that is submitted for a workforce project such as this, they're required to submit an access plan showing where the access drives will be, identifying all proposed land uses, the maximum density that they're proposing, the maximum building height, and any proposed buffers. So within that, you're getting essentially we call a bubble plan of, not the detail and level that you're seeing on the site here with this site plan submitted, but that's generally what's required.
Those 4 criteria.
Right.
What, and forgive me, I may have missed it. What is our building height here? What are they
They're
proposing?
proposing 4 stories.
Is that, okay. I won't get into how relative a story is when you could have 12-foot ceilings, but nevertheless. I think, Pat, that might be it for now. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Commissioner Koffer, I have one question. Sure. Tell me, because this is, as somebody said that we up here already, that they haven't seen one come through. That is 100% workforce housing. I understand this is tax credit project. How often would you say you've seen these come through? You can get, you can phone a friend if you need to ask some of the other staff members approximately. How often do we get 100% workforce housing developments?
How often? I can recall a few projects. Sterling Reserve on Carolina Beach Road.
I think Sterling Reserve and the last one that we did were both senior, and I think I think they were both 100%, but they were senior housing. So, and I think that's probably one of the distinguishing characteristics here is this is 100%, but it's not limited to seniors.
That's right.
And I believe
So-
Mosley was also senior. I believe the Mosley project also was 100% affordable, but it was also senior housing as well.
That's right. So maybe 1 or 2 a year?
If that, yes.
If that, okay.
And just to provide some clarification, the reason that you haven't seen the bubble plan before, that was actually an amendment that we brought through within the last 2 years. And it was done specifically to recognize that to do workforce housing with significant units, so 50% or 100% workforce, those projects typically don't have a lot of upfront money in order to come in and do a plan at the level of detail that we normally look for with a conditional district. And so that was an amendment that we put forward to streamline that process and make that a little bit easier for those projects, understanding that they don't have the same kind of capital as a market rate project does.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. Oh, sorry, one more. Commissioner Cook.
Last one, I thought of it. It reminded me. So some of the citizens have asked me in the past, and I'll ask you just so that we can understand, with the workforce component, how, and this is, I probably stepping ahead, but applaud the applicant for coming in at 100% and doing it longer than the 15 years at 30. But how does the city of Wilmington monitor, enforce, confirm that these are the leases that are in play?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have within our department, we require, and that you notice in the conditions, there's a requirement for annual reporting. So we require an annual report to be submitted to our department to show compliance with the area median income and the standards in which they were approved, whatever that might be for each particular case. So we do monitor that on a yearly basis for these projects.
And I would just add, with some of these projects, and I know this one is also requesting city funding, and so there's monitoring that goes along with that as well from our Housing and Neighborhood Services Office.
And if they're awarded the tax credits, there's a lot of reporting on that too, so. All right, thank you. I believe we're, oh, nope, sorry. Commissioner Adams has got one for you.
Sorry. I noticed in the packet, there were a number of three-story architectural precedents that were included. The applicant didn't provide any elevations or depictions at a four-story project, I'm guessing?
They did not.
And
But
it-
I believe they provided some examples of previous work that they've done, but not for this particular project.
Okay.
But I will defer to them. They may have elevations now that they can provide.
All right, thank you, Mr. O'Mahony.
Thank you.
All right, and the applicant's here?
I'm substantially shorter than Pat, so thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name's Amy Schaefer. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Blue Ridge Atlantic. I have the development team with me, so we have our engineers from Paramount Engineering, as well as our traffic engineer from DRMP. If you have any specific requests or comments about the project, they can answer those. While Pat pulls up my project, I will say I want to stay on the presentation so I don't get completely lost. But this is a 100% tax credit project. We do not own the property yet. We are under contract, and that's pretty typical in these kinds of projects. You want to make sure that you have all the funding in place first, because if you don't get the tax credit award, the project simply doesn't go forward. So with that, Mr. Adams, this is a rendering of what we hope the building looks like. We don't have much more than that at this time, just based on where we are in the process. But we did want to try to show you something about what we hope to see on the site. Staff went through, but just quickly to orient you again, this is on South Carr Avenue, surrounded by MD 17. We are adjacent to an employment and academic node on a major corridor and a live-work area of opportunity. Kimberly Drive dead ends into what used to be another MD 17 project but has since been raised. And the corner of Carr and Kimberly. I show you this picture because at our community meeting, a lot of the residents who use Kimberly Avenue were concerned about the site triangle here and the lack of visuals. We explained to them that as part of our project, we will have to, of course, clean that up and that site triangle will be improved for them as part of that project. Again, just a little bit more. As you can see, Kimberly is quite overgrown. That will all be cleaned up as part of our project as well. Here's just, I didn't include the site plan with all of the comments that staff had, just so that it would be a little bit more easy to visualize. We are proposing 184 workforce housing units for 30 years. We are retaining the specimen trees on site. As staff said, we have worked with them to add the multi-use path along Carr. In addition, the neighborhood is going to offer amenities to our residents, such as picnic shelters, a clubhouse, and a playground. Here are some other projects that we've worked at. Canopy Point is a 100% workforce housing project. That's one of the senior facilities. The applicant, Blue Ridge, did that. And that came through before you all. Just to kind of show the level of amenities and interiors that we provide.
Ms. Schaefer, I'm going to need you to talk into the mic just a little bit more. For some reason, it's
Okay.
not picking you up very well.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
I can be loud. So just to go through these. So as you all know, I won't belabor this point, but there is a substantial housing shortage, and as staff and Ms. Lyle have already said, a 100% workforce housing project doesn't come along every day. So it's a desperate need that the city has. The current zoning was established prior to the development of UNCW and the multifamily in the area. As you can see, a lot of that area has already been multifamily. A lot of the single-family homes that are there are rentals as well. The property falls just outside of a mixed-use place for employment academic node, and as you know, the comprehensive plan is not site-specific, so we do think we fall in that. And this project would help support those needs of that area. I believe one of you asked, and I apologize, I've got it written down. MD 17 does allow for 36 units per acre with 10% affordable units. We have 100% affordable units, and we've only asked to go up to about 20. So we are not anywhere near that maximum density that we could request of you tonight. Housing is a need. Increased cost of living, the housing deficit in the city of Wilmington. And in addition, these projects are very amenity-rich housing projects that do allow residents to have a sense of place. As you can see from Canopy Point and as we've provided, it's not just going to be apartments. There is green space, there are trees, there's a picnic area. And so it's a desperate need of the city. And with that, we are happy to answer any questions. If I may, very quickly, I do think I have some answers to some of the things you asked. Knowing that traffic is an issue on Carr, we did ask Ms. Chiefs to conduct a traffic study. She has done that. If you have any specific questions, there were no particular findings at this time. So, but she is here to answer any specific questions that you might have about that. Building heights, we're anticipating about 55 feet of a building height here. Let's see. Bubble plan and what we're going to be tied to. One of the reasons that we wanted to make sure with staff that we weren't tied to a specific site plan was because of any potential expansion of Carr Avenue. And so we would still, of course, have to meet all setbacks and things like that, but we did want to make sure that if there was a change, that we wouldn't have to come back through to the planning board if something had to change on the site for Carr Avenue. The plan that you see is the plan that we've worked on and refined since the community meeting, and we intend to move forward with that. And as planning said, certain things like the access, the density, those kinds of things cannot change. And they would be a major modification that would have to come back through you all. And if you have any specific questions about the tax credit projects, the hoops that they have to jump through for monitoring or for compliance, I know the gentleman from Blue Ridge would be happy to explain it to you. They've got that down and can explain it in a fashion that I think is very understandable.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. We have Commissioner Pollack.
Amy, this is back to your statement you made about traffic a few minutes ago. I'd like to hear, you said that you went ahead and did a traffic study anyway.
Yeah.
And I'd like to understand, from this young lady, you did a study. What did the study suggest to you? Did it suggest any improvements required to Carr Avenue, whatever we want to call it? I mean, I'd like to hear from you what the results, where it takes you.
Of course. My name is Caroline Cheeves. I work for DRMP. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of North Carolina, and I've been doing traffic studies for my entire career. I've done probably hundreds in the New Hanover County area, and just all across the state as well. I'm very familiar with the WMPO guidelines for traffic studies, and so when this project came about, the project team obviously knew that Kerr Avenue is a hot topic for traffic. And so even though they weren't triggering a traffic study, they wanted to go ahead and do their due diligence and just make sure that the infrastructure there was going to be able to handle this traffic. And so we met with the WMPO and we scoped out the traffic study with them with the understanding that they will not be reviewing it because it's not required of this development and we don't want to waste staff resources. But we did have a meeting with them to discuss the study area intersections and sort of get their feedback, obviously ask if there's any future developments out here to include in the study and any future roadway improvements. So I just want to go over our study, so this might take a little while, but just want to be thorough with it. So we studied all the way from Randall Parkway along Kerr Avenue to Wilshire Boulevard, and then obviously Kimberly Way, and we included Fountain Drive in there. The reason why there is a threshold for trip generation in terms of traffic studies is because that's about the threshold where you start to see major impacts. And the purpose of a traffic study is to compare what the site would be in the future without this project, and then compare it with this project and see what that delta is. And if we have a significant impact, then we have to go back and make recommendations. And so what we found in our study at all the off-site intersections, we don't see a significant impact by this development. By the time all of the trips get distributed to the roadway network, we're only seeing very minimal, maybe like half a second of delay in some areas. Maybe 1 or 2 approaches, you see 2 seconds of delay, and that's not enough per the WMPO guidelines and the DT guidelines to trigger any improvements. At the site accesses, along Kimberly Way. Kimberly Way is obviously a dead-end road. In Kimberly Way, there is a 2-way left turn lane along Kerr Avenue. So we aren't recommending anything at that access, Kimberly Way and Kerr. And obviously Kimberly Way and our site access, there's not a ton of opposing traffic, so our really only recommendation is to just stop control that site access. And then at Kerr Avenue and that northern access, our only recommendation is to just modify that 2-way left turn lane median, or the 2-way left turn lane, to provide a storage lane, a break in that for the site access itself. And then we have the multi-use path along the frontage of the site. We considered a northbound right turn lane. However, right turn lanes are often not the best for pedestrians. People just are able to go a little more free flow. And based on all of the warrants that we see, or based on all of the warrants for the NCDOT, for turn lanes, we weren't quite triggering them. I do always like to consider turn lanes in my traffic studies, especially left turn lanes for safety reasons, and right turn lanes are really more for that flow of traffic. But with the pedestrian component here, we decided not to recommend that. So overall, we found that the existing infrastructure is expected to accommodate this development. So if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And we did submit this to the WMPO, but again, we're not expecting a review back from them, just so that they have it, and if they get asked questions, they're able to speak on behalf of it.
Just a little follow-up. You said no recommendations based on existing conditions. Help me understand again then, what is the existing condition at each of the entry points as it sits right now on the road?
Yeah, so based on the standards that we follow and the levels of service that we are seeing, we were honestly seeing every single intersection in our study was operating at the level service D or better, which is an NCDOT.
Let me stop you because you're
Sure.
way over my head already.
Yeah.
I'm talking about practically right now, going out there where these entrances are going to be. Is it a 2-lane road, 3-lane, 2 lanes, turn lanes, entry, right in, those kind of things? What's out there right now?
Yeah, hang on, let me just find that page for. So for example, Kerr Avenue and Fountain Drive, which is an unsignalized intersection. So we are seeing that it takes it's a level of service D for that left turn. It'll take approximately 30 seconds for vehicles to make that left turn. However, we don't increase that significantly, as I was stating earlier, and that the delta that we see between those, we are not increasing that as a significant amount, is what we say.
Okay. Your support team has come behind you, whether you know it or not. I don't know it.
It's all right, it's all right. I think, Commissioner Woodruff, what you're asking is it a 2-lane road? Is it a 1-way
Oh,
road?
okay,
Is there
sorry.
a median?
Sorry.
Okay. There is no median on Carr Avenue right now, and it is, I'm trying to see if I've got any pictures. It is a 2-lane road.
Okay. Okay, so with that idea, is there any, by you saying the current structure is sufficient, there is no plan to widen or put in a turn lane between the two, or a right-in approach lane?
Yeah. So, wait. Kimberly is doing that, but there's a left turn lane down Carr Avenue. Yeah. Yeah. So there is a left turn lane down Carr Avenue. We call it a two-way left turn lane. Yeah, down the middle. So there's already left turn lane in place
Okay.
along Carr Avenue.
In my profession, we used to call that the suicide lane, actually. Okay,
We call it a two-way left turn lane now. Yeah.
okay.
But yeah, we wouldn't be able to add another left turn lane since there's already a left turn lane at each of those access points.
Any lanes proposed for right turn in?
So that's what I explained earlier. Just due to the pedestrian walkway, and we're not quite meeting the volume warrants for NCDOT, we made the decision that no right turn recommendation.
Okay, if that walk lane or proposed whatever it is, we're not there, would not a right turn lane enhance the traffic flow?
So, yes, a right turn lane would allow vehicles to get out of the through traffic for them to move more quickly into the site. However, because of that pedestrian, we also see a lot of times we don't like to recommend that right turn lane when we're expecting to have, with that multi-use path there.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sam Weldon with Blue Ridge Atlantic. Maybe I should put
You need
He's
to move the
taller,
mic
you
up.
got to go up.
Thank you.
I just wanted to take 2 seconds. I'm taking some notes here, and my team's done a really good job at answering questions. But Commissioner Cofer, there
Can you
was
state
one.
your name? I'm sorry, can you state your name?
Sam Weldon with Blue Ridge Atlantic.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'll speak further in here. There was one item I wanted to hit on that you mentioned earlier, was selling. And I just want to be clear, with this tax credit project, nature of what we're doing here, we are a long-term hold owner. We have no intention of selling this, and quite frankly, with the compliance and regulations, it's almost nearly impossible. Our business plan does not support that, and that is not an intent we have here. So I just want to clarify that. And as Madam Chair hit, there are several compliance levels that we would be regulated to and monitored by, the city being one of them, the state agency being a second one, property management, and with the city, with our request into the city, that would be a third or fourth layer. So yeah. That was all I had. If you guys have any questions for me.
Commissioner Cofer, go for it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Weldon. And not to impugn the integrity of your project at all, but, some of this applies to every project we see. And, I'm learning on the job. So this is a new one personally for me with the tax credits that you haven't acquired ownership of the property. It's 100% workforce. So some moving parts that we're just kind of internalizing here. So those questions are just,
Yeah, absolutely. I did just want to echo one more item here, and to the 100% of workforce and how often we see these projects, which is rare, and the need for these projects, as Madam Chair was hitting on, in an area that really hasn't seen new workforce housing in 20 to 30 years. So in a while on this area of Kerr Avenue.
Commissioner Pollack?
Real quick question, something you just said a minute ago. Will there be on-site management 24/7 on this project?
There will be on-site management. They will not be on-site 24/7, but there will be on-site management. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Commissioner Adams?
Given the the high propensity of the 2-bedroom unit mix, I know that the LDC has a substantially lower required parking, but you park in the project at 1.35 per unit. Do you feel like that's an adequate amount of parking given your unit mix that you're looking at doing?
It's a good question. We do. Quite frankly, and The gentleman from Paramount here, our engineer, would tell you, we won't go below that, because we, as an owner, and a long-term owner, we like to stay above that level, especially on a workforce family deal. So, yeah, we feel very strongly about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks for coming up to the podium, because I have one for you. I wanted to, because we don't see these very often. Yeah, I meant, sorry, I had a question for you. We don't see these very often, so I wanted to take a moment to ask to kind of describe the LIHTC process. I know they're very competitive to get those credits, and your scoring has to be pretty much perfect to even be considered. So would you educate our commission a little bit about that process and what you do from here?
Sure, yeah. So to get a little bit down a rabbit hole, this project, there is a competitive tax credit process. This project is not that. This is a 4% tax credit project, so it's technically non-competitive. But so what happens is we submit a preliminary application, which also goes into why we have a site plan right now that really doesn't change, because we really aren't allowed for any movement once that application goes in, which already has. At that point, now that the preliminary application is in, we will begin rezoning process, which we have to have complete, and our soft dollar financing commitments from the city and other respective commitments locally at our full application, which will probably go in later this fall. At that point, we are really hopeful to begin construction sometime, in end of Q1, Q2 of next year. So there's quite a few moving parts to these projects.
Great. Thank you
Thank you all.
for that. Appreciate it. All right. It's time to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who is here to speak in favor of Agenda Item 2? Start with your name and your address. And of course, speak into the mic.
Yes. Hi, my name is Logan Secord. I live at 2900 Newtown Drive, Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm here to speak in support of this agenda item. I want to say I'm not just in support, I'm excited. Wilmington is short on housing, and it's short on affordable housing. I want to applaud the developers for doing not just the bare minimum, but doing the 30 to 80% AMHI for all of their homes. These are homes where teachers can live, where public servants can live, where blue-collar workers can live. They can't live in even the developments that come before this board that do the Wilmington density incentives, because 80% AMHI is far beyond what is in their capacity. So the fact that this is before the board and this quantity of units will be a larger chunk in our affordability solutions than anything I have seen, arguably all of the zonings I have read through in the past couple of months. So I am incredibly excited to see this coming to the community, hopefully. As to traffic, I want to highlight that this is close to the Harris Teeter. It is close to locally owned Grinders Cafe, one of my favorite coffee shops, locally owned restaurants there. That will overall help us to go into the mixed-use design that all of us are aware of as part of the comprehensive plan. I have two small recommendations for consideration for the Planning Commission and this developer. Neither would impose material cost or schedule burden to the best of my understanding. It's related to the stormwater on site, and I know I've spoken on this before. This is going to be a material increase in impervious surfaces in the area as part of the wider growth in Wilmington. There are two small things that I would advocate for that can really help mitigate that. The first is I would advise 25% of the parking spaces, possibly down to 10%, be done with pervious surfaces. If you want an excellent example of that, I'm a UNCW alumni, and I can remember various places on campus where most of the people past freshman year would know to walk barefoot because it is ankle-deep water. I recently toured UNCW, and the sustainability manager, Felicia, showed us, 4 to 8 parking spots per lot near the drainage were made pervious surfaces or in low points in the center, completely eradicating some of those issues and reducing stormwater runoff into the waterways. As you know, if it goes in the parking lot, there's no filtration system. It just goes straight into the greater system. Additionally, at the stormwater pond, you could do stormwater wetlands. That would involve almost no cost at all. You raise up the drain a couple inches higher. You plant native vegetation. This would have the additional benefit to the developer of increased aesthetic as well as the community, again, reducing stormwater pollutants. So those are the 2 recommendations. As far as I've been able to find, pervious surface for parking lots are roughly 10% difference versus regular pavement. At 25%, that would be 2.5% of the parking lot, which is on the greater scheme, we're talking sub 0.5% of the total budget, something to consider. And making a stormwater wetland is as simple as, buying the right plants instead of just doing grass, almost nothing. So those are 2 recommendations for the developers and for your consideration. But overall, I want to say again, I'm extremely excited to see this development here to address our affordability crisis here in Wilmington. And I would close the saying, I am on the team Kerr Avenue as opposed to Carr Avenue. So I will cast my vote in that direction. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secord. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of agenda item 2? How are we doing on time? Ms. Painter, less than 10 minutes? Okay, we did get a comment in from an email from the Workforce Housing Advisory Committee that met earlier today, and they voted to support this project, and I'll read their statement. Workforce Housing Advisory Committee supports Avenue Flats development as it is in line with their strategic plan and efforts to increase affordable housing for the city of Wilmington and greater New Hanover County area, and that's from Sharm Brantley, the Workforce Housing Advisory Committee Chair. To add to the public hearing, hot off the presses. All right. Is anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item 2? All right, anyone here to speak on agenda item 2? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Kind of questions, discussion do we have? Would the applicant like to address the public hearing comments?
Just briefly, that I did take notes of the request, and we would be happy to have our engineers look at that. We can't agree to anything today, but it's definitely something that we haven't. We can't agree to anything today, but we do have notes, and we're happy to take a look at those requests.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any discussion on this? Commissioner Kofer?
Jump right in. Thank you, Madam Chair, and a few questions that'll likely be addressed to the applicant. And some of these we can go through pretty quickly. Any improvements to the wave transit stops in front of your project? The infrastructure of the bus stop itself?
So you mean like actually adding a cover? Because currently right now there's not. We do not have that right now. I think there's 2 stops on Kerr Avenue, one on the front and then the other one is across. We have not considered making improvements, as we certainly could.
Okay, just a note. Really appreciate the playground and the active recreation component to this, because if families are living there with young children, what better way to have them on site to, basketball goals, shoot some hoops, really anything that you can give the kids is a big check in my book, just as a comment. Elevators in a 4-story building?
Yes, sir.
It's apropos with this in the middle of a tropical storm. Do those require generator power during a hurricane event or loss of power?
It depends on the project. Some we will, some we won't. We can certainly consider that here. Yeah.
They have battery backup systems that are in the elevators, so in the event of a failure, there's enough time, for the elevators to be able to exit safely if they need to in the event of a power failure.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Chris Eisenzimmer. I'm also with the development firm Blue Ridge Atlantic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not going to hold this project up by any means, but I do feel that at some point the city of Wilmington should consider some of these higher density projects and the impacts of us living in a Hurricane Alley and what happens when all those residents lose power. Just a footnote. One of the citizens, I've got his first name is Logan, mentioned the coverage and the impervious. Our calculations in the package show that the maximum allowable is 70%. You guys are right around 61.3% with this project. Is that 61.3% mean impervious? Is that what that means? It does. Okay. That was just a yes or no. Thank you. It looked like in the community meeting that there was some recognition or a call out on the drainage ditch on Kimberly, and there's a comment that says we cannot touch that. Can we speak to stormwater and how we're going to handle it and why you cannot touch that ditch?
I will say, I think the resident who spoke, she was referring to the ditch on Kimberly Way that we cannot touch because it's not on our property. It's on the south side of Kimberly Way.
And they're not here to speak up to that, but we have had a project come in front of us before where the city of Wilmington recognized the residents' concerns. It was Victory Gardens, and the city actually addressed those concerns. So just as a note, if there's some engineering issues on that side, maybe the city can address it.
Yeah, and Mike with Paramount Civil Engineers here, and we have entertained that and mentioned that to the city and Rob Gordon as well.
Hey there, Mike Nichols, Paramount Engineering. I was at that meeting, and the persons who were speaking about that wanted us to make the ditch bigger, and they wanted us to clean it out, and it was almost like needed it to happen today kind of thing, you know what I mean? And we were under the, being that it is in the public right of way, we said that we would pass that on to the city via our comments, which you received. And then, the stormwater department within the city or city engineering could take a look at that. They also wanted us to cut back shrubbery on the other side of the street for site visibility. And again, our answer was, we'd love to help you, but it's really outside of our property to be able to go and cut that stuff down. So you might have saw that comment in there as well. So it wasn't meant to be a rude response. It was just the actual, that's outside of our scope to be able to do what you're asking us to do. They also wanted us to widen the road on Kimberly as well. So there are many things that were outside the scope, but
right,
appreciate you asking.
Okay. Well, and occasionally the city will, and your TIA process may address those neighbors' concerns off your property. We've seen it happen in the past. So, and I think I'll probably wrap up with, had one more. Well, the double left, I'd never heard that before, so that's just what a turn lane is. It's a double left. Okay, that makes sense because you don't need to take a turn lane to go right. Double left is just a turn lane. Okay. Very esoteric in the industry out there, but complicated language. So in conclusion, height, 4-story, you said 55 feet. Last month we had a project that we're asking for 45 feet. You would have thought that we were really shaking this city upside down. Nevertheless, usually when we see 4-story in this Oleander corridor and some of the other corridors, they have a commercial, it's a CDMU, it has a commercial component. I understand this project does not, it's still 4-story. You're neutralizing that with it being 100% workforce, so you have my support there.
Great. Commissioner Adams?
I think there's a reason why we don't see projects like this a lot, because they're hard and they're difficult. The tax incentives, people figured out that they can make a lot more money doing things a different way, so I appreciate addressing this type of need. I also, from a technical standpoint, I think the site plan got better with some of the tree preservation, so that is a good thing. I also want to remind people that through the TRC process and having to address both city and state stormwater quality design issues, if anything, stormwater issues get better on sites that get developed. And I know that's counterintuitive sometimes, but again, I think that's always something to point out, that any project has to go through that level of rigor. So I'm going to support this project as well. I think it's one we need. One last thing I'll say is, if any of you want to have a debate about Kerr versus Carr, ask some of the relatives of William Carr Scott, our governor, how they pronounced his name, and see what they have to say.
All right, well, thank you for coming forward with this project. I also appreciate the investment of your time and other resources into our community with the 100% workforce housing project. So what is the will of the commission?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a request to approve Agenda Item 2, lots 507, 509, 515, 519, 529, 529 South Carr Avenue, from R10 to MD 17 conditional multi-dwelling residential conditional district. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington: the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest because the proposal allows for affordable housing units and compatible development near commercial services, education centers, and transit stops. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
Thank you. Commissioner Adams has moved to approve Agenda Item 2. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Woodruff with a second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving Agenda Item number 2, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thanks. Good luck with your project. All right, our next item is agenda item number 3, a general rezoning, and my understanding is that they're going to ask for a continuance, so I will not read all the addresses. Are you going to come forward first, or do you want the applicant to do this?
Yes, Madam Chair, I will ask the applicant to request a continuance for this item.
Sure. Mr. Nichols?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Matt Nichols. I'm here representing the applicant owners, and we would respectfully ask for a continuance. I think additional time would be beneficial on this one. You've probably noticed that staff is recommending denial. And this is an important matter to my clients. I think it's also important to the city, the subject area. So we think some additional time to talk with staff about some of their concerns, and additional time would be helpful. So we're respectfully asking for a continuance until September.
What's the date on that? September 5th. September 4th. Thank you. Okay.
I'll move.
Commissioner Woodruff?
Make a motion to move this item from the current agenda to the September 4th agenda as requested by the applicant.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Adams. All in favor of granting the agenda item number 3 a continuance, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We're going to move forward with item 4? Okay. All right. Agenda item number 4 is a street closure of a portion of an unnamed alley between South Front Street and South Second Street, approximately 131.49 feet in length, consisting of 0.07 acres. And Ms. France is here to deliver our staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The request is to close an unimproved portion of an unnamed alley located between South Front and South Second Streets. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request. And these are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the site. These are photos of the adjacent properties surrounding the proposed closure. Site is currently zoned LI, light industrial. If approved, the street closure request will add additional lot area to 4 adjacent lots. This section of the unnamed alley extends to the south but does not connect with any other existing rights-of-way, and it doesn't connect to Marsteller Street. The comprehensive plan calls for development to occur in a compact pattern that reinforces the efficient provision of public services and utilities, improves the performance of the transportation network, preserves open space, and reduces negative impacts of low intensity and non-contiguous development patterns. The closure would not impact or reduce connectivity to South Front or South 2nd Street, and there are no public utilities located within the alley, nor would the closure restrict access to public utilities. Staff believes the request would not have an inverse impact on the roadway network. Future connectivity and circulation within the public road network would not be impeded by the closure of this portion of the alley. Staff believes the request is reasonable and in the public interest and recommends approval. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. France. Any questions with Commissioner Adams?
Is it fair to say that this closure would have a impact on the item that we just continued just before this?
I think it's a possibility, yes.
In what ways from city planning staff do you think that closure of this alley would affect the adjacent parcels?
It's my understanding, and obviously I would defer to the applicant, that the property owner owns all adjacent parcels, so they would be receiving the remaining area of the alley to all those parcels.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Pollack?
If we grant the request, does this create any undue hardship in any way to the city?
Staff does not believe so. An email was sent out to other departments as well, and no one had any adverse impacts for the proposed closure.
So if you remember, was it, I guess last month we had a closure case in front of us as well, and
Yes.
one of the items was that I think there were utilities actually running under the street. Does that same case here, there's utilities we need to worry about, or is this?
Nope, there are no utilities within the alley, and CFPUA has commented saying it doesn't restrict access to utilities either.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cover?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the geometry of this shape and trying to understand what plat on the planet had that as an alley. So it lends me to wonder where it says unnamed alley in bold from second to front. What is that section? What is that stretch? We don't know. It's irrelevant, but
I'm not sure. It's a variable.
that looks like the alley.
Yes, that's a portion of the alley. I don't 100% know the width of the alley in all these portions. It's an old alley, so.
I'm just historically curious, that's all. I mean, I think it's, some of the roadways that are city-owned from front to second are dangerous. I wouldn't really want to keep an alley open, but this is just kind of a geometric oddity. Here goes our geometry major over here, he's going to step in.
Commissioner Adams?
I think if you were to go back and look at old historic Sanborn maps of this area, I mean, it's probably not a coincidence that that alley is mid-block of, kind of the east-west arrangement, and it was probably there intentionally to provide rear access to historically sized lots.
Thank you, Ms. France.
Thank you.
And the applicants here?
Good evening again. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I'm Matt Nichols. I'm an attorney in Wilmington, and I'm representing the adjacent surrounding applicant owners in this case. We did have a few slides that I think will help illustrate this. Yes, the next one. Great, thank you. So the subject area is unusually shaped, for sure. I don't know what the history of it is. I don't know that as a practical matter, that area has served any function as an alley. My clients own the property surrounding it, and the big parcel there, sort of at the bottom of the screen, they've owned for 30 years plus. And then you can see that they've also owned the other parcel in teal color since 1991. Incidentally, they also own the remainder of the block there, which isn't shown, but at the corner there, which is not relevant to this, but my clients essentially own the block there, if you determine the block at the alley. But more recently, my clients purchased the property shown in purple, and so they now own all of the surrounding property. And the property historically is, get to some of these aerial photographs. We just sort of pulled these off of the county GIS. But the property, you would say, sort of the parallel line with where the alley is, there's a fence there. I don't think that's been used for access for years and years. My client thinks it could be, 20, 30 years. So the alleyway that you're seeing is not used for access to my client's property, and it hasn't been for, I think, a really long time. The previous owners put a fence there, and you can see over the years, I mean, they used their property for what it's zoned for, light industrial purposes. And so it's not impacting any other properties on the alley. Nobody will be denied or diminished any access to their property as a result of this. It's just sort of an unusual sort of remnant part of what, I'm not even sure it was the same alley. It's just, again, it's just a part of it. But in any event, the request here is it makes sense to ask for it to be closed. It doesn't serve any functional purpose. And I think historically it looks like the previous owners used it like they owned it anyway. So, and the city doesn't maintain it. And this would sort of get it away from the idea of the city ever maintaining it. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. The whole property is in the south side small area plan. That whole area is recommended to be UMX. That's for another hearing. That was the one we continued, so I won't get into that. But we're ultimately asking the city to zone the whole thing MX. That's what we'd like. It's light industrial now. I won't go into the previous item, but it's light industrial. We really think it should be UMX, and that's what we're going to hopefully be before you next month, asking for all of it to be UMX and not light industrial. So, in the staff report, it meets all the requirements in the statute. It meets all the, all the criteria you would look at as a city for closing an alley. There's really no need for it to be open. It doesn't serve any function or purpose. Doesn't affect anybody negatively in any way by closing it. No view sheds. Again, we appreciate your consideration of the request and glad to answer any questions you have. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Adams?
Would the closure of this alley and the resultant, I'm going to say, simpler, more contiguous, larger parcel that would result around it be more conducive to developing a thoughtful, conditional rezoning district request of this parcel, or would it not change the approach for rezoning that additional parcel in your mind?
Well, it certainly would help with the development of the property regardless of the zone. The property is now zoned light industrial. We don't want it to be light industrial. We think the UMX is by far the best zone for that. If you look at it from protecting the neighborhood, protecting the surrounding residences, the types of uses that you can do in light industrial, if you really look at the list, it's pretty intense. And there's things you can't do. You can't do residential. You can't do really any significant retail. You can't do neighborhood commercial. You have things like contractor storage yards, storage facility sales. I've got a list from the previous presentation. I won't get in it. But to answer your question, it certainly would help with the use of the property regardless of the zone. But what my client is ultimately asking for, which is for another day, is a UMX zoning of this. And certainly that helps. Again, historically, it looks like it's been used as light industrial. It's zoned light industrial, but I just want to keep in mind that we're asking for it. It will come before you. We want it to be UMX. We think that's a much better zone for the property, for the surrounding area. And it's important to point out it's light industrial without any conditions. It's not a CD light industrial. It's just, if you can meet the requirements and you can go light industrial, you could do a whole lot of stuff there that my client does not want to do. He does not want to do that. So, but this is something that has been identified since he acquired those properties in 2022, and it makes sense. And that's part of the reason why we're bringing the request back for the UMX, to hopefully for y'all to consider that. So, but the street closure, the alley closure, it's not serving any function and hasn't served any function for quite some time, so.
Commissioner Pollock?
This is probably more to staff than to Mr. Nichols.
Yes, sir.
Listening to, obviously, there is an interrelationship, and I get it and all that. There's a process for doing street closures. Would this have to go through that process? Would there have to be a city council hearing, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, if you recommend approval this evening, the next step is to do a resolution of intent to close. And actually, I should say, whatever action you take this evening, the next step is a resolution of intent to close that would go to the city council. If they approve that resolution, a public hearing would then be scheduled for about 6 weeks out.
So because this is exactly where I wanted to go, Linda, was he wants to come back with the other item for, in our meeting in September. I'm sensing even if we move this along and say, recommend a resolution to close, that the earliest that would get to city council would be what, their second meeting of this month?
No,
The resolution to intent to close would go in the first meeting in September, and then the public hearing tentatively for October 15th.
So I'm just laying this out because as I'm looking at the applicant and what I think he wants to do, he might have a hard time coming back to us with his other, request while this is still open.
I think right now what the applicant is asking for is that you've continued a request for a general rezoning.
Okay.
Yes, it's for the surrounding properties, but it's a general rezoning. They are the same applicant, same general area, but they're two distinct applications and they can be processed differently, and there's no direct tie.
One doesn't hold the other one up.
No.
That's what I wanted to get to. Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Woodruff?
Matt, just my own curiosity here. I always picture an alley going from somewhere to somewhere. This isn't going anywhere. It's not going, it's not coming. And I don't mean to, but I'm just curious. I mean, is it really an alley that we're closing, or is this just property that the city owns? And the reason I ask, if it's what the city owns, there's no closure, it's for sale.
Well, my understanding, it's identified in some capacity as an alley. Now,
I don't know.
Mr. Woodruff,
Okay.
This, my client, Patrick Carroll, if you might want to add to it. Yeah.
Patrick Carroll, the applicant.
But again, it's going from.
Yeah, just to, sure. Could we have the first map that you put up there?
I don't know.
Is it your map? No. Could we have the first map that you put up? Okay, there. Yeah, so, couple of things. To answer your question, the alley that runs from Front Street back to Second Street was meant, in my understanding, to service the back of these properties. So at the end of the yellow, where the large building is, you needed access from the alley to get to the back of that property. It was meant to service all of it. So it is an alley, meant to service the back of all of those adjacent properties. So now that we own all of that, there's really no reason to have a city alley there.
Oh, I understand completely your position, totally. And I'm not arguing with it either way.
Right. I just wanted some clarity, perhaps.
I'm just trying to.
And then my next thing I would say, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's okay.
Is the property in yellow is fenced in and has been that way, well, most of it from, it's got to be over 40 years. The people that owned those two pieces of property I purchased in '22 from John Pucci. I think he had it since 2007. Before that, Waccamaw Transfer for many, many years. And they had fenced it in. So when John bought it, it was already fenced in. So nobody would ever even know that there's any type of alley there, because it's pretty much been fenced for over 40 years.
Okay, then.
If that makes sense.
I understand. But
Okay.
The larger part of the yellow that's coming down in that you think was to access the back of something?
The narrow part of the yellow toward the bottom of the screen?
The heavier part of yellow, this yellow that's coming down, not that little skinny strip, but the larger coming down. That was, you think, was being used to access the back of these properties?
Absolutely.
Okay. But it's been fenced for how many years, you think?
My guess is over 40.
Okay. All right. I don't have an argument for it. It just, in my mind, I have a hard time swallowing that as an alley, which is, if it is, its closure is the right thing to do, I'm all for it. But if it's not an alley and it was
Surplus
city property, then it's a whole different ballgame on how you acquire that piece of property. So, thank you.
It doesn't, there's no parcel number associated with it, right? It's not a parcel, so.
And again, the Front Street to Second Street, the large alley, meaning to service the back of all those lots at the top. But the alley in the yellow is meaning to come this way and service these properties from the back of the properties, has always been my understanding.
I got you. Thank you.
And if I may add, this has nothing to do with the rezoning to UMX, whether it stays light industrial or not. It's just pretty much house cleaning as far as I see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Commissioner Adams?
Since the rezoning is separate from this, if it is closed, what zoning would it resort to or revert to independent of the rezoning request? The light industrial?
It's currently zoned light industrial.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Nichols. All right, we'll open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of Agenda Item 4? Anyone here to speak against Agenda Item number 4? Come to the podium and start with your name and your address.
Good evening. I am Jonathan Hill. I live at 110 Mirror Street, which is just north of the property. I'm not necessarily opposed to the alley closure. My only concern is that I have a garage that is on the alley currently, and I use that as my primary means of going to and from my house. And I need to turn onto the alley to get in and out of that garage. My only concern is if this would narrow the alley to the point where I wouldn't be able to turn in and out of my garage anymore. And I don't know if that's something that they might be able to answer.
Jonathan Hill.
If you look at this area here, where Bledsoe is, that's all fenced
Right.
now. It's fenced now.
My only
So it's
concern
not going to change
is
the
does that-
dynamic of what's already there.
So does this proposal go past the current fence line into the unnamed alley?
We're in the public hearing section, so let's wait till after the public hearing is over and you can go through this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Very well.
Like I said, that is my only concern. Otherwise, I support the project.
Okay, great. Thank you for raising your concern and for the applicant's willingness to address it. Anyone here to speak? Anyone else here to speak against agenda item 4? All right. The public hearing is closed, so I would love for the applicant to come up and continue to respond to the concern in the public hearing.
Yes, sir. I want to make sure I understand which property we're,
Go back to the survey, because that, you can see the names on it, where it was when he first came up.
there we
Yeah,
go.
above the word alley. That's
I
the
see,
Jonathan
okay.
Hill.
We're certainly glad to meet with Mr. Hill and make sure that's not a problem. I think it will be hard to do standing here in front of the screen, but I know there's a process where this has to go to city council, and if it's possible, we're glad to meet with him on site and just make sure that that's not a problem for him. We don't want that to be a problem for him.
All right, and it sounds like there's a fence there already, and if that would become part of the applicant's property, the applicant could not encroach into the rest of the alley
Yeah.
to block Mr. Hill's driveway or anyone else's.
But to Mr. Hill's point, I don't know if the fence matches exactly the line we're showing, and I don't want that to be an issue for him. So I guess this survey is not really showing the fence, and the surveyor drew this as just sort of a logical extension of the line, but the survey is not showing the fence, so if there's additional area there of the alley that's there now that is not fenced in, and Mr. Hill requires that for his vehicle, we're glad to accommodate that. We're glad to meet with him on site and see if that's an issue or a problem. And I think there's sufficient time to do that before this looks like the earliest it would be to city council would be 10/15, and then the intent to close is not for basically another month. So I guess what I'm saying, we're glad to meet with him and try to
Great.
address that concern.
Thank you.
I think it can be addressed.
Any other comments, questions for the applicant while he's at the podium? Commissioner Pollock?
Yeah, I just, looking at the same thing we're all looking at, does the condition that Mr. Hill cites, does that condition apply to other homeowners? I mean, or can you say definitively it does or does not, or you'd have to go back and look at all that?
Yeah, I don't want to misspeak. The survey's not showing the fence on there, but
Okay.
I understand the fence has been there for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And if it hasn't been a problem, if you would say we need to follow the fence line to do the closure, I don't think that's a problem. I don't know that it's necessary, but if we go out there and that's what the commission is wanting us to do, then we'll see if we can resurvey that line and get it to follow the fence line, which I guess has been functional for 30, 40 years. I think it's pretty close, but it's hard to say that that's a straight continuous line. I think the surveyor just drew it straight across because that's what makes sense, and seems to be ample width in there.
And Matt, the only reason I bring it up is that, I understand Mr. Hill's concern. There's, the Browns, the other people that, live along there. I'm just,
Yes, sir. No,
Yeah.
no, right.
I hate to
understand.
have this come up in a
Right.
street closure hearing, and I'm advising you to take a look and do the staff work before we ever get there.
Yes, sir. We don't want it to be a problem for anybody.
Yeah, I
Yes, sir.
understand.
That's-
We're on the
yeah.
same page.
We're glad to meet with Mr. Hill, but if the commission's inclined to say, follow the fence that's there, we'll get the surveyor to do that, have the street closure at the fence. Because from my understanding, I can't speak for any of those folks, but I'm not aware of any complaints of people saying that fence that has been there for 30, 40 years has interfered with anybody's access to the back of their property.
Commissioner Woodruff?
Matt, and on that line, I mean, I don't know that I heard Mr. Hill say it, but there's a fence there now.
Yes, sir.
And it sounded like he just wants to be sure that whatever we do here doesn't make it so that he can't make his turn into his property.
Right.
But do you get the impression right now that fence is not a problem for him? I mean, he's making the turn without a problem with the fence?
That's my understanding, but I don't want to speak for Mr. Hill if he's been using it and.
He says he's accessing it now, so.
Okay, right, yeah, that's my understanding was that he can access his property now and it's not a problem.
Right. And your proposal is the fence isn't going anywhere. I mean, it's just, well, we don't know where the fence line is, though. You say it's not on this
Well, we don't
diagram.
have the dimension from the rear property line of Mr. Hill's property to the closure.
understand.
Yeah.
So that would be helpful. Maybe that's something you could put on at city council if you think it would still be an issue. But I don't see any reason to follow a fence line when what the surveyor's kind of drawn out there is makes more sense.
Yeah, and I believe the city surveyor has reviewed the map and the meets and bounds. That's a requirement before we even submit the application. So, just so I'm clear, I want to make sure I understand the direction. We're certainly glad to meet with Mr. Hill, make sure his concern is addressed. It doesn't sound like you're saying we necessarily have to follow the fence line, which might be sort of,
Don't know.
might be.
Yeah, I'd prefer actual dimensions on the survey to
Yes.
know where, how wide is it, would the unnamed alley be at its thinnest part, at its narrowest
Yes.
part, and, just give a little more information to help the folks who are accessing it, give them some assurance.
Yes, we'll, that's not a problem.
That's what I'd rather see than following a fence line that was
Yes.
arbitrarily put up.
Yes, no, not a problem. We're glad to meet with Mr. Hill on the site and make sure
Thank
it's
you for
not a
that.
problem. Thank you.
All right. What's the will of the commission on this? Commissioner Adams?
I think that, again, this is just a residual piece of right-of-way that over time has just been rendered useless. So I think I can support closing this part of the city right-of-way, but I will say by doing this and adding even more contiguous land into the adjacent properties, it's going to strengthen my need to see a thoughtful, conditional rezoning of that property that takes into account the adjacent scale, residential, urban character, and an existing contributing building on site down the road.
Commissioner Koffer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take a stab. A couple things in discussion here. I may have a question or two for staff. Would be in the street closure process, no matter, irrespective of how we decide, this still moves to city council. Is that the process?
Sorry, yeah.
Without appeal? Okay. I'm going to have a hard time. When I approach this, keeping an open mind, as we should, I would say, coming into these hearings, and those in favor and those that are against, but it looked like there was a compelling reason to approve the abandonment of this portion of the alley for several reasons, myriad reasons. One being that, if you were trying to do a comprehensive plan of that site, you would you'd be restricted to the setbacks off of the public right-of-way. That makes no sense. You own all the property on both sides. It doesn't serve any future need for the network with interconnectivity. Everything that's the opposite of the case we saw last month. So there is a compelling reason to close the alley, with exception to, I'm not sure we know what we're closing. So I'm gonna have a hard time voting for something that I do believe needs to happen, but I don't see what we are closing. There's a comment that the surveyor connect the dots. I don't even know what that means. I would say that 9 times out of 10, we could refer to some type of historic plat, even if it's the fire insurance maps that showed what this was. I'm in support of closing it. I'm not so sure I can vote in favor of it tonight, given the information we've been provided.
We have meets and bounds, so we have a legal description of what we're closing. What do you?
I don't know how it affects those folks, because right now what I'm seeing is as it's in processing it in real time, it's almost like a T-head or a hammerhead that some may have been using. Where does that fence fall? I don't know. You know, I can't tell. No one can tell us that right now.
You know the approximate width behind the Frank Brown property? Of what would be left behind? That's probably the tightest spot there. Sure, yeah, come on.
I certainly don't speak for the city surveyor, but the city surveyor has reviewed the map and the meets and bounds. That's a requirement before we, I think, can even submit the application. So, but if there's concern with it, we can, my client can correct me if I'm wrong, we can connect basically the opening of the opening of that portion of the alley, the two, we'll take out that sort of elongated triangle.
That little sliver.
And just put it from, I want to say right under the A, and where it says alley, and then the next corner of my client's property. Just draw the line that way.
Bring the one that's 101.16, just bring it straight across?
Just bring it straight across at an angle and just cut it, or I don't know if there's a way to draw on here. But we can have our,
this way. I would go straight. I would go straight.
I can use the mouse. Okay, here. It's not, is it touch screen? No. Oh, it's a trackpad, okay. Oh, it is up there. Okay, sorry. I'm looking at my screen here. We would take this point here and draw it to here, and that's it. We're glad to do that, if you'd like us to do that.
I'd rather see all right angles and just bring that, the line that's 101 feet straight across, but.
Well, we would prefer to do that. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I'm going to make sure I understand. You would say from this point here?
No, I'd say that.
Down here?
Yeah, like straight
All the way
across.
across?
Yeah,
think
that's what I would, but I'm not asking you to do that before you go to city council. I'd rather see dimensions on it and let them, and make sure we're at the minimum alley standards, the minimum width for alley standards. Just put that, a little more numbers to it.
Yeah, your suggestion, Madam Chair, is fine. We'll draw a right angle from, be a right angle from here, straight across to here. We'll have the city surveyor redo it. Or not the city surveyor, our surveyor, to submit to the city surveyor for review. If the commission would like to see that, and I think that's clearly within inside the fence. Is that right, Patrick? Yeah, would you say it is?
Because your measurement was.
Yeah, I actually.
The fence isn't shown.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, if I could just raise a point. As Matt mentioned, this survey was reviewed by the city surveyor, and the description that was prepared based on the survey was reviewed by him. And I think if we were going to alter that, then we'd need the city surveyor to
To
have something
look
to
at it again?
review before we did it. I don't think we need to be doing that on the fly, that it would need to be something they would look at.
Yeah, that's fine.
Excuse me again, from my understanding, as you mentioned, we had to present it to the city surveyor for him to verify that all of this made sense.
He's verifying the width of what's left as part of his review.
Yeah, well, my point would be if we were going to recommend that it be changed, I think that would be something the city surveyor would need to bless.
Yeah, they would have to go through the process again. What's the minimum width for an alley?
Any new alley is 20 feet in width with 16 feet of pavement. That's new alleys today.
To create an alley? Okay. I'll be happy if there's just a few more dimensions on it. Commissioner
We're
Woodruff?
getting deeper and deeper into not knowing what we would need to know. It's just, and nothing against you guys. I mean, I completely understand. I understand Mr. Hill, Mr. Hill's situation. But, you know, it could be that he's already using more than the alley to make this turn. I don't know that. I don't know where the fence is related to his turn. You know, I think we need the fence on here, or we need to know exactly the lines of even the property owners above, like his property. You know, it's just a more detailed survey, I think is necessary. I don't know how that gets done in proper order.
Certainly no arguments, Commissioner Woodruff. No, I mean, valid points. So we can have the surveyor. I just want to make sure I understand the direction from the commission. Is there any preference on how you would like our surveyor to draw the proposed area? And of course, we'll have that reviewed by the city surveyor before it comes back.
I mean, just for assistance with city council discussing it, I would like to see more dimensions. I don't know how true the lot lines are. They haven't been surveyed. It's just on an existing plat, right? So just the survey, the only survey is the meets and bounds. We have those 4 lines. But if there are at least some general dimensions on there, I think that would help city council in their discussion. And that's, I would support it moving forward to give them the information they need to make the decision.
Okay.
Commissioner Adams?
There's also a discrepancy between the online GIS mapping for 106, 108, 110 on Mears Street versus what is represented here in terms of the northbound extents of the alley, which is also just another issue that I think might be adding confusion about. We're not quite understanding the details of this situation, and in this case, they kind of matter.
Yes, sir. No.
The city surveyor, I think, will get into that level of detail. So, any other? Commissioner Gopher?
Sorry, just one question on process, because I'm not familiar with how you get to this point with street closures, but I think from our perspective, it is public trust, welfare, safety, and, you know, this is public property that would be privatized. What, on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parcels that are adjacent to the north side of that alley, what did you go through to notify them? I'm sure there's a big notice piece to that, but looking at the Brown property that cuts further in, you know, are they aware that we're here tonight? How does all that look in the public eye?
Yeah, everybody would have gotten a letter for sure from the city. When we submit the application, we submit the envelopes for the adjacent, and the notification comes from the city, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so the city sends the notification to all the adjacent property owners. And I believe their sign is posted.
There are also two signs
Two signs
posted.
are posted, right, yeah. But I just want to emphasize, before we can submit the application, if you look at the application form, I don't think the application can even be accepted by the city until the city surveyor reviews what you have here and the meets and bounds that my client's surveyor proposes. So you just can't go down to the city planning department and say, here's my street closure application, and then it starts getting reviewed. You have to get that reviewed before you can submit your application. So I just, we're following the steps here. We certainly understand the commission's questions, concerns. We're glad to try to address them, so.
Yeah,
Commissioner Pollak?
Yeah, but I think, Matt, where I think, at least as I'm hearing the conversation here, is to get this right, and right being, the definition of right being, if we were to move this, recommend this go forward to city council, to schedule a street closure hearing, et cetera, there are several dimensions here that, God, I hate to say it this way, but the city surveyor probably needs to relook at this, because it looks like something could have very easily gotten blessed or approved, and we're sitting here picking it apart, or at least having enough questions that it's now giving me pause as to, boy, do I want to recommend this going forth to city council until that all gets cleaned up, because I don't feel like I'm doing my right job of staff work of recommending to them, a completed, application if we've got these many questions. So it's just, that's kind of what's going through my head at the moment as I'm listening to all this. I go back to Commissioner Kofer's line. I'm trying to figure out what I'm closing, or what I'm being asked to close. That's where my confusion is. So just all cards on the table.
Oh, yes, sir. I'm not arguing with you at all. We're glad to do whatever direction that you all want us to do. And again, I certainly don't speak for the city or the city surveyor. So if you all want more detail, we'll provide more detail. That's not a problem. We want to make sure we're addressing your concerns, because glad to do it.
All right, I would support this with some more dimensions on it. Where's everybody else on this?
I have a question myself, procedurally, where we fall. Matt, is your intention to resubmit and bring this back to the commission, to the planning commission? After the city surveyor looks at the line?
Yes, sir. That's perfectly fine. If it's okay, we'd prefer not to submit a whole new application, and that just be the same application. We're just amending the area.
Just to continue this, to allow you
Yes.
to amend the actual,
Yes.
potentially amend the meets and bounds the survey.
Yes, if the commission pleases and it's acceptable to everybody, we would simply come back with a new, what's in front of you with more detail. And in the meantime, we're glad to meet with Mr. Hill too. And we'll have the surveyor put the fence on there. And then I just want to make sure we're sort of, when we come back to you, we have a general idea of what you're looking for as far as where that, I'm just going to call it like the horizontal line. How do you all really want that shown? Because we can do it. It's not really that critical to what it's important, but it's not the critical part of what we're talking about. We're trying to get the main part of that area closed, and having that area up top is, we don't want that to be a concern of the city, and we don't want it to be a problem for the neighbors. So we're glad to draw that how you would want to see it.
I have another procedural question. Whether we recommend it or not, it's going to city council next? Or if we ask him if he not if he doesn't continue it, if we vote, and regardless of the vote, approval or not, it's going to go to city council?
Correct.
Unless
Right, because
we
for
continue
example, the last month you recommended denial of street closure, and we brought that resolution of intent to close to the council last night. Because there's no appeal required for that. That's a recommendation, and we just bring those forward.
So, where are you?
I'd probably defer to the applicant. If you prefer to continue this, I'm going to have to vote against it. That's where I am. And if we're talking shapes and whatnot. I wholeheartedly, don't want to belabor it. But if it's important to those neighbors backing out of their garages, it does matter. So at the end of the day, if path of least resistance was, look at the rectangle going from north to south and just connect those two dots rather than the long triangle, and you guys can live with that. It seems like it'd probably be a win-win for everybody, but I'm not advising you to do it. I'm just saying I can't really vote on it tonight, in favor of it tonight.
So here's my question to the applicant. Matt, are you asking us to consider a motion to continue this until the September meeting? So you can incorporate all the pieces of the discussion that you've heard?
I think so. Can I please check?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's fine.
thank you.
While you're checking, where are you all on it? Which one?
Yes, sir, Mr. Pollock.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, we would kindly ask for a continuance to come back next month to provide you with more detailed information and ask for your reconsideration at that time.
I'm going to make a motion that we accept the applicant's request to continue to the September meeting.
Second the motion.
Commissioner Pollock has recommended a continuance for agenda item, what are we on, 4? And who was over there? Commissioner Woodruff with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you for your time.
All right. We have our agenda item number 5. I believe we got a continuance. Is someone going to present that, or?
Continuance to September 4th.
All right, do we have a motion to continue the item 5 to a date certain of September 4th?
I'll make a motion to continue item 5.
I second.
Commissioner Adams has moved to continue item 5. Commissioner Pollock with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. The motion passes 5-0. And agenda item number 6 is cleanup of Land Development Code, various items and amendments related to accessory and temporary uses and parking facility design. And we have our director, Ms. Painter, to deliver our staff report in Mr. Chambers' absence.
Yes. Good evening. This is part of our quarterly cleanup process. And we have several amendments. I think you'll find most of them are really, when I say cleanup, cleanup. We have some definition corrections. We need to clarify units of measurement, remove some incorrect and unnecessary text. We have, and I'll go through some of the others that are more substantive regarding accessory use standards, parking facilities design, and temporary use standards. The First Amendment, and this is one of those dimensional clarifications that I mentioned, we need to clarify that to calculate, or the measurements for minimum lot area are square feet, not feet. Amendment number 2, this was inadvertently done in the reverse. So in manufactured housing districts, our intent was to allow accessory structures such as sheds, not accessory dwelling units, and we did it the reverse. So what you'll see is proposing to allow accessory buildings and structures with conditions and prohibiting accessory dwelling units. For the temporary use standards, this is an amendment that was put forward by one of our councilmen, and the council supported putting this through for consideration, and it is a proposal to increase the number of temporary outdoor events that can be held in the central business district only from 2 events to 20 events per calendar year. There are some additional clarifications that staff has recommended. One is deals with recommending that we have 1 permit for each event. And part of that has to do with the fact that when we get these events in, we do send them over to the fire department and police department in case they have staffing needs that are associated with them. I did check with our zoning administrator, and she did acknowledge that we have done multiple events on one permit in the past. But that was the main reason that she was looking at this, was because this allows us, when those events come in, to directly notify our public safety partners and agencies. The other item that we're asking to clarify is that outside agency review has to be obtained prior to the permit. So as part of our internal process, our zoning staff will review any requests for a temporary use permit for an outdoor concert or event to our fire department and to the police department for their review to see if they have any specific permits that are needed or approvals. However, there are outside agencies such as New Hanover County Building Inspections and the Health Department. And the purpose of the language that was added was to clarify that it is the applicant's responsibility to make sure that they contact those agencies and determine whether any permits are needed and obtain those permits before they hold the event. So it's really about putting the applicant on notice for those outside agencies. It's not part of our process. We don't have a referral process to those agencies.
After she's done.
I did include, I know we had some comments in terms of expanding this beyond the central business district. And so I did include just kind of a snapshot of our zoning map so that you can get an idea of the central business district versus some of our other non-residential districts, such as the UMX, which is shown in light purple, as well, and our community business, community service districts, et cetera. Amendment 4 deals with motorcycle and moped parking. This is something that was put in the new code and was really intended to reduce the amount of pavement that was needed to accommodate these types of vehicles. However, because it was written as a requirement, it has been raised that that is actually creating issues, because if there is a development where they don't see a demand, for example, for motorcycle and moped parking, they are being required to install one space for every 25 parking spaces that they provide. So the proposal is to amend this and replace that requirement with an incentive. So what we would do is to allow the motorcycle and moped parking spaces could be used to satisfy minimum parking requirements for up to a maximum of 5 standard parking spaces. And 2 motorcycle or moped parking spaces would be the equivalent of 1 standard parking space. Additionally, we would not count them towards the maximum number of parking spaces allowed. So providing incentives for these types of spaces to be included, but eliminating that requirement because, again, we were hearing from some of the development community, particularly with regard to housing, when we talk about affordability and increase in costs, that this was actually just becoming something that they thought they were being asked to provide that would not really be used in a lot of cases. The next amendment, and this is one where we are removing unnecessary text that was placed in error. So if you'll notice, the division is related to signs, and we have purpose and scope, and the first paragraph that is there talks about changes of uses and landscape improvements that would be required as part of a change in use. So that is a paragraph that is misplaced, so we are deleting that as it has nothing to do with signs. Amendment number 6 deals with sign standards, and there are 2 changes to this table. The first is to add a dimension for how we calculate maximum height, and note that that is in feet. And the second, if you look at the number of lanes column for O&I, is to clarify that for properties in the O&I district that have 100 or more feet of street frontage and are on a on a road with 4 travel lanes, the rest of the information in that row applies. So we inadvertently left that one cell blank in terms of the number of travel lanes. Amendment number 7 deals with sight distance, and so you can see that in 2 places in this section on vision clearance, we inadvertently used the word sign instead of sight. So we are clarifying that and removing that and replacing that word. And amendments 8 through 10 in your packet all deal with definitions. We are doing a few things here. There are 2 definitions and terms that are 2 terms that are defined in our definition section. One is flesh cut and one is maturing tree. Neither of those terms are actually used in the Land Development Code, so we're removing them because there's no need to define something that is not in the code. We are recommending that we correct the definition of the understory, of an understory tree. We inadvertently inserted the word less, and so tree less capable of thriving in the lower light, and it really is intended to be a tree capable of thriving in the lower light intensities found under the canopy of shade or canopy trees. And last but not least, we are recommending that we add a definition of studio. So we do have studios that are listed in our permitted commercial uses. A question did come up earlier today about studio apartments. We don't use that term, so this really does just refer to studio. And I think when it's listed in the table, it actually gives some examples such as artists, martial arts. And so what I will note on this is the definition that is on your screen. The two highlighted are changes from what was in the staff report. After going through this with our zoning administrator today, based on the questions we had received, we did recommend that we change this to a workplace for the display and sales. So to clarify that you don't have to just display, you can actually practice, teach, display, and sell items in these locations of an artistic, and then we added or athletic discipline, because some of the examples of studios, if you think about, are martial arts or ballet, and while those have artistic elements to them, we wanted to also be clear that for those who may be thinking purely in terms of sports or athletic performance, that those are included here. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Painter. Commissioner, wow, we got everybody. Commissioner Woodruff.
The one that we've gotten some comments on about the going from 2 to 20, what's the history basis? I mean, that's not just an increase, that's a quantum leap.
So this deals with, in the Central Business District, we have one, it is a district where we allow nightclubs by right. There's no specific conditions. But when it comes to outdoor events, there are certain venues. So for example, we have the city's waterfront park, where we have outdoor events. There is the clamshell that is located at Pier 31. So you have that. That was part of an older code. It was built. It's a purpose-built structure, and we do have venues that are interested. They don't have permanent stages and structures that they're planning that they use, and they're coming in to do temporary events. And so that was raised. We have one business that has been doing a concert series. And because they don't have a permanent stage, if they came in and were permitted, they could receive a permit for a permanent outdoor stage. They choose to just do this on a temporary basis and bring a vendor in who sets up a stage for various events during the summer. And so we cap temporary events at 2 per year. And so that was a request, and they brought this to one of the council members, and the councilman, as I said, brought this to the city council and said that he would like to see this amendment considered, and the council asked us to add it and to take it out of cycle. However, since we had to delay our normal cycle, we put it in with everything else. But this is really, I think, to recognize that the Central Business District is different from many of our other districts in terms of the fact that you could have a permanent outdoor stage, and there are no separation distance requirements for amplified sound outdoors in the CBD, such as apply in some of our other non-residential districts.
But I'm just, when you talk about non-residential, there's so many residential units out there by the Live Oak and the other one that you call a clamshell. I mean,
I've heard it called the clamshell, but it's by Marina Grill.
I know what you're talking about anyway. But I mean, that's residential. I mean, it's all around there. And those are clearly within the 1,000-foot restriction we have in residential areas about amplified sound.
It's residential zoning districts. So that separation distance applies to residentially zoned property, not to property that's in a mixed-use district such as.
I understand completely, but I'm just thinking if we're going to all of a sudden, instead of 2 concerts, go up to 20 on any particular site, I mean, that's one almost every 2 weeks. That might be kind of annoying to people in the residents around there. I just don't know, is there any consideration for who lives around those venues that we're talking about?
Well, again, this was, I think that the reason that this was limited was trying to limit it to the Central Business District and not apply this across the city, and recognize that the Central Business District is different. It has some different characteristics from the remainder of the city, which is why you see that separation and that distinction.
But doesn't that district go just about bridge to bridge?
It's shown on your, Shown on your screen, it does not go, it's close to bridge. I mean, there is some of the HDR that comes in, if you look at that bright green,
Right.
that comes in above.
But the northern end of it, I assume that's the bridge that's crossing.
Yes,
the river.
the northern end goes to Isabel Homes, yes.
How many residents do you think live up there now? I'd hate to count. And there's a lot of them. I just don't understand. I mean, I understand why the venue would want to do it, but I'm not sure we're taking into consideration the ramifications of those around it by the number and the proximity to the residents that are growing meets and bounds. Every day you turn around, there's more condos and apartments going up. So, my view.
Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, I had two comments, questions. One is about this same thing. I mean, I don't understand why someone wouldn't argue the same would apply for UMX, right? Or other non-residential districts. So it seems strange to me that somehow it's been compartmentalized only as a modification within the CBD. So that's something I don't understand and kind of have an issue with. The other one I a little bit want to hear information on is the motorcycle and moped parking. What's the rationale for, again, why it's altering the count towards required parking or not? Because everything else you presented really seems to be about clerical or syntax sort of things. But these two items in my mind have quantifiable difference in change.
Yes. I would say you're correct. These are the two most substantive. So again.
Yeah, let's stick with one amendment at a time. We'll do Amendment 3, and then we'll do the moped one next.
So just to, on Amendment 3, the reason the Central Business District, we did single that out is because it is something that is permitted. If you're doing this as a permanent use, you can do that 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So it's the only district where you have that ability to do that today. If you built a permanent stage on your property, you could go out and do this. So we looked at that and said, okay, then that is reasonable to increase the number of temporary number of times you can do this as a temporary use. Because if you came in to do this permanently, you could do this. You would be able to go through that process, the site plan process, build a stage, and have these events. And so given the fact that you can do this, it's permitted as a permanent use, we did think it was something that we could consider to increase the number of temporary events you could do, which is different from the other districts. The other districts don't have that permissiveness when it comes to
So what's to stop someone in that district from just building a permanent stage if they want to have more events?
To your point, what comes to mind is when I used to sit on the Board of Adjustment, and then it was the first case that we ever heard when I joined this group was the bottle shop out at Seagate. They built a stage, and they fully intended to have outdoor, I'll call it a concert for lack of anything else, or some type of outdoor, music venue. And, the city, no, you can't. And it was all because of, the correct zoning at the time, et cetera, et cetera. But if I'm them, if nothing else, and I see this, it's like, well, wait a minute, what about me? I asked the same question about the horse farm out on Wrightsville. I mean, that passed in, they can do some things. So I think the question is, how do you fence off the central business district? And that's what's puzzling to me is understand the intent, but it's how do you contain it to just that when there's other places that have a stage or have the capability to do something?
But I think if I heard you correctly, you said if you build a stage that's permanent in the CBD, you're unlimited to how many events you can have. So I don't even understand the need for this corrective thing around temporary when if your goal as a property owner is to promote live events, just amend your property to accommodate it by right.
I think the issue is that for some businesses, that this is not something that they're doing every night. This is their business model. This is accessory to their business as a whole. It's not their primary purpose to do live music. It's accessory to a bar, a restaurant. And so if they put that permanent stage in, that's something they're taking up land that could be parking, it could be something else. And if it's not something that is part of their daily business, they're looking for that flexibility to be able to bring that in on an as-needed basis as opposed to putting it in permanently.
Okay, so where did 10X come from as a rationale then? Going from 2 to 20? Why not 40? Why not 80? Like, help me understand where 10X came from.
That's a struggle for me because this was the number that was given to us by the sponsor, and so this was the number that they came up with and said what they felt comfortable proposing as an increase. So this was not a staff generated number. It was something that came.
Isn't that the resolution, the document that you included
Yes.
that lays that out? That's where that comes from. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's that resolution document dated 6/18.
I understand the difference in the CBD. I mean, people are moving into that district knowing that there are permanent facilities for concerts, the Live Oak and the Shell that we mentioned. I mean, that is a different district. We're not talking about what's fair to other people who have built businesses in other districts. We're talking about what's appropriate land use in this district. And I mean, 20 does seem kind of arbitrary to me too, but there's probably some kind of calculation about the number of warm months in the year. But I would just offer that up for response to some of the comments so far. Commissioner Cofer?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll segue off of your comment. I think that may, behind the scenes, be part of this, and maybe there's someone here that, when we open the public hearing, can speak to it. But for a lack of history, appearances on this board, there is some discussion I've heard today that, that there is a private commercial entity that's taken over the Downtown Sundown concert series. It's, kind of a private-public type of lateral pass of the ball, so to speak. I've also heard that the Central Business District has always been sort of very unique, as you've pointed out, characteristics compared to other business districts throughout the city. It's sponsored by Councilmember Waddell, and it'd be hard not for me personally, probably not to support this one. But yeah, I hear it does seem a little arbitrary and with the residents' complaints. So my question, though, on that component is, you get 1 or you get 20. What happens? I mean, what happens if something goes amiss and all of a sudden the residents around an establishment is not happy with the temporary use permit? So what happens when they come back for the second, third, 19th one? Is there a time where the city can say, "Whoa, time out. We're not granting this because we've heard negative feedback"? Or how does that look for you guys?
So in terms of this, we're looking at a number. It's going to be, are you number 20 or are you number 21? If you come in for number 21 on a zoning permit side, we're going to say we can't issue that. What the police department, a lot of times these also come in coincidentally with permits to exceed the noise ordinance, and that's a permit issued by the police department. And I know one of their criteria is it allowed by zoning, but I believe they also have the ability to look at, have there been issues with past events. But I will also say I am not an expert on that permit process, so I don't want to imply that, but that's my understanding, having looked at the ordinance, is that the police department can look at things such as, have there been past issues before they issue another permit to exceed the noise ordinance.
So, I mean, I'd say then, for that response, the police department's pretty much the only entity that's going to say, nope, we're not giving you another one, even though you're short of your 20 on an annual basis.
It would become, we would issue a zoning permit, but they may end up with a noise violation, if that makes sense. If they don't get a permit to exceed the noise ordinance, then they could end up with a noise violation if they violate the noise ordinance.
I have a smile because this is deja vu from the horse farm thing.
So,
Commissioner
I
Adams.
mean, I just want to echo what Ace is saying, like, if I read item 2.3, you know, in this, it talks about the whole point of LDC maintenance is to correct errors and deficiencies. This is just a modification. Like, I don't understand why this wouldn't be brought up on as similarly as a text amendment, because it is an intent to change and modify versus reconcile or correct.
So, and again, what I would say in this case, and we will actually probably be separating that out into a separate ordinance for council. Council authorized that amendment to come off cycle. They said, take this off cycle, bring it to the commission the next time you can. Because of our July schedule, this package of corrections normally would have come to you in July. Because you had an extensive schedule and this was a city-initiated amendment, we purposely pushed this off until August. And when we did that, we said, well, we have this resolution from the city council that says they want to push this amendment forward. We will put this in the same report to the commission that the other amendments were a package with. But this amendment, again, I think that's why we gave you the resolution, was to say this is not something that was initiated by staff. This was initiated by the council, and that we were asked to process this amendment and bring it forward for consideration.
Madam Chair, if I may, just one final note, just you know, before joining this board and working in my time in planning at Wrightsville, I actually helped revitalize the Merchants Association down there to become a unified voice for businesses to communicate with the town of Wrightsville Beach. And my understanding is that the downtown incorporated entity is that similar voice of commercial establishments, commercial property owners, stakeholders in the commercial, you know, whether they're a business owner or commercial property owner, to communicate with the city of Wilmington. So that's, without knowing anyone here saying that, I just feel like that's what this looks like to me. Some, you know, anyhow, for what that's worth.
Commissioner Woodruff.
For what it's worth, I don't like this. I don't feel comfortable with it. We're just jumping from a number of 2 to 20, and not that we're just asking questions you can't answer because we don't know who's behind it, what's behind it, where it's behind. And so, to the extent that it can, I'm voting against this amendment.
Commissioner Adams.
I was going to say, I think we have the ability to make a recommendation, and part of our conditions can be omission of certain amendments, correct? Like, we could recommend to approve amendments, all of them except ones we choose not to recommend, or will we vote on the group as a whole?
Mr. Attorney.
I think it could be separated. I think something similar with the EV happened. So I think you could, if that's your wish.
And I do want to, I did receive a clarification. I really want to be thankful for technology because our zoning administrator was not well enough to come tonight, but she is watching from home, and so as I present, she is sending me little messages, and it was that we can also withhold zoning approval if there are past police issues. So if the police department has had past issues in response to your question, we can withhold a zoning permit based on the message on my watch.
And as a reminder, we do have.
That helps with some level of just, you know, policy guardrails that we can understand.
So we're not the police. There's other, I don't mean it's snarky, but I mean there's other bodies that are reviewing this and overseeing this in addition to what we're looking at appropriate land use. So, Commissioner Pollack.
Yeah, another way, and not to belabor the topic here, but I mean, I'm sitting here and staring at this verbiage, and I'm trying to keep it simple. All it's suggesting to me, and it's kind of, Commissioner Adams, to your point, it's like 2 to 20. Okay, maybe that's the wrong number. Maybe it's just increasing the number. That's number one. Number two, it says clarify requirements, so it's each event has to have a permit. I'm kind of okay with that. And it says clarify outside agency review requirements. So if somebody comes in for a permit, you know, make sure these are the boxes you got to go get checked, not us, you. Okay. The bottom two, I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, fine. And there are built-in policing, bad word, built-in checks and balances in terms of the different city entities. But it's just, I do think the thing we're stumbling with is just the arbitrary 2 to 20. Where did, you know, I don't know, is that just a number, just, we got somebody waving, so maybe we need to go to the public hearing and.
Well, again, to me, it's not just the quantity, this is a request to modify.
Yeah, it's
not
not a,
reconcile or correct
it's
something.
not a verbiage correction or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And I don't think that this is the right means to do that. There's another means to do that, and LDC maintenance, in my opinion, is not the way to address that.
I accept your premise.
And again, and I will take responsibility for that as staff. It was easy for us to wrap this in because we were bringing you the quarterly updates.
So Madam Chair, I think it's probably good to go to the public hearing because
Well, we haven't talked about the moped one yet.
Oh, got it. You're right. Thank you.
So, and I would say again, when you look at this package, this is a modification. It's clearly not a grammatical error. It's not a missing word or an extra word. This is something that came up as part of discussions at the Workforce Housing Advisory Committee that was raised as a concern, and we said, okay, you know, if this is really a problem, we will bring this back and see if we can propose something. So. If in the future with these, we need to carry these as a separate amendment, as a separate case, we can do that as well.
And Linda, you're talking, that's the meeting where you guys, everybody sat down with the developers and had the multiple round tables sitting around.
Yes.
Got it.
All right, can we move on to Amendment 4? I don't remember what your comments were, Commissioner Adams, so could you start over?
Well, again, I was just wanting some clarification of I'll say the genesis of the correction. And, you know, again, now hearing this, for the sake of consistency, I have to wonder, because this is a request of a modification as opposed to a correction, is LDC maintenance the right way to do this or not?
It's still an amendment to the Land Development Code. I think that what I'm hearing from you is that in the future, we need to separate our substantive changes out and do that as a separate case number. And I think we have done that when it comes to, like if we were doing signs, like we'll typically take signs as a separate amendment. But we have mixed these a little bit in the past. So in the last package, we brought forward some modifications to the ADU standards that weren't really cleanup. It was, okay, we're going to make some changes here and provide some additional flexibility. But if the commission would prefer that we do kind of a quarterly package of, here's literally the cleanup. These are the grammatical errors, printing errors, things that we're catching as we go through, and then have a package that's separate of, here are substantive amendments that we're proposing based on issues that have come up as we've implemented the code, we're happy to do that.
Thank you. Amendment 4. Anybody else have Commissioner Cofer?
I would agree or concur with that logic or that sort of line of thought. It's almost like creating a consent agenda packet. Just anybody have something to say, otherwise we're just moving on.
And I will also note, we've now, the code went into effect in December of 2021. We are now in August of 2024. And one of the things I was going to tell you is you're going to see slowdown from us on bringing things to you and getting back to the point where if with those substantive amendments, saying there's a process for people to bring those forward, because I think we are getting, we'll always bring you the cleanups, as we go through and find those errors, we'll bring those. But I think you're going to see a slowdown because we have done a lot of substantive work over the last few years, understanding that we tried new things with this code and we made a commitment that as we found issues during implementation, we would bring them back. And so, but we think at a staff level, we think we're going to start kind of tapering off of that because it's been 3 years. We've addressed a lot of those issues that have come up in implementation.
It's been 3 years.
3 years in
Oh my
December.
gosh.
It was just yesterday. Huh?
2.5, so 2.5.
It does. Okay, any other questions for staff on this agenda item number 6? I'm going to do the public hearing all at once, even if we end up breaking up so. All right, the public hearing is open for agenda item number 6. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item number 6? And that could be on any of the amendments in the entire package. And just start with your name and where you live.
My name's Christina Haley. I live at 1800 Eastwood Road. I am president and CEO of Wilmington Downtown Incorporated. I am here today with Joe Apkarian, and who I've been working with and including Luke Waddell, to try and wrap our heads around trying to get this, I guess, amendment to you all. I realize it may be out of process for you all, but I just want to take some time today to kind of review the history of this and speak to what our organization has done in the past. My board of directors, which contains 37-member, is a 37-member board of directors, supports this.
Ms.
change.
Haley, I'm sorry,
Yes.
you're going to have to be closer to the mic or pull it down or
Which one
something.
am I
I don't-
using? Both of them? Oh,
That one's
This
better.
one's better, okay. So we have unwavering support to this change to the Land Development Code as an accessory use. WDI in its history has used outdoor performances, including temporary stages, in order to bolster economic development efforts for downtown Wilmington through our Downtown Sundown concert series. Back in 2021, we decided to discontinue that concert series solely because we had a vested interest in performing other economic development initiatives and thought it prudent to turn over those types of events to the business community where they can reap benefits and return revenues following COVID to their establishments. This was a 14 concert series. We held it downtown on the waterfront. It was loved. It was a beloved event for many of the community members. Previous to that, to this particular Land Development Code change, I believe the number of uses was around 14. Then it was changed to 2, and maybe Linda, you could help me check up on my history with that. But we were able to host these concerts either as a city-sponsored event or with the Land Development Code in line with what we were doing. We have a thriving business community. Many of them want to offer outdoor performances, and many of them do have temporary stages put up to host these. I believe even the Shell has to have a temporary stage put in place. Even though they have a platform for their performances, they need a sizable stage in order to host and elevate their talent. Even Live Oak Bank Pavilion has to put in portions temporary stages because the concrete platform that's at Live Oak Bank Pavilion simply is not large enough in order to support some of these large performing acts. In line, Commissioner, with your concern about the residential district, we've recently had a 293 apartment unit complex popped right in front of Live Oak Bank Pavilion, and they don't seem to have very much issue fulfilling their residential base there. It's more along the lines of being allowed to have our small business owners have some sort of competition with the 30-plus performances that are held within the Central Business District at Live Oak Bank Pavilion and be able to reap some of the benefits of having their own outdoor performances in light of some of the competition that may be out there. So in summary, we are trying to support our business community. We are trying to offer a greater array of cultural offerings for our community. Many of the concert series are free, if not offered at a lower cost than some of the other establishments downtown. And it all supports what we do as far as economic development. It supports all of our urban standings and in line with what we do to support our community. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take some, but there are other applicants here, or other folks here to speak.
Okay, this is a public hearing portion, so we'll just let you have
Let
your
me-
turn, and then
Okay.
we'll close it and
Sure,
talk
sure.
with
And
Ms.
I'll just add, I'll just ask your thoughtful consideration of this. I realize that you have a lot to weigh, and it's seemingly a substantial change here. But again, we used to do this 14 times a year and supported our community. And I would like our business owners to be able to take on the legacy of our downtown concert series and continue to offer that. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. Anyone else here to speak in favor of Agenda Item 6?
Good evening. My name is Joseph Epkarian. I live at 801 North 4th Street, Wilmington. I also own the Eagles Dare at 420 North 3rd Street. I own Taco Baby Restaurant at 125 Grace and the Poorhouse Bar at 103 Market Street. Wanted to go and give you some of the background on where this evolution came from and give you a reason why the quantified number. But firstly, I want to thank you for taking the time, Madam Chair, Chair people. Where this came from was us inheriting and taking over the Downtown Sundown Music Series, calling it now Free Concert Friday, in the parking lot of the Eagles Dare, located at 3rd and Red Cross. To answer your point about temporary stage usage, why this is so important is because I have a parking lot. I do not want to put a temporary stage there. If I put a permanent stage there. If I put a permanent stage there, now I've lost parking spaces. Also, that requires significant increase in construction, getting approved by TRC, and simply monetary value. I sunk my entire life savings into renovating and bringing that building at 420 North 3rd Street back online. I don't have the money to do that. Also, it just doesn't logically make sense. So this is all tied to the Downtown Sundown Free Concert Friday. This is the evolution of this. To my understanding, this code changed on January 1st of 2023, where it was at 14, and then it went down to 2. That is to my understanding. I could be corrected. So for us to then now be trying to get it up to 20 is because we run the concert series from May through July every Friday night. So this past one just finished up was 13 weeks. Interesting thing that you all brought up was potentially an event being one permit. If that's the case, I agree, I don't need 20, but I would just need 1 as long as it covered all 13. And again, the evolution of this came from working in concert with WDI and Councilmember Waddell. Where we're at now is, this resolution was proposed and council passed it to amend this. So maybe it didn't, Councilmember or Commissioner Adams didn't come this correct way. It was done because I was getting fined, putting on a concert series, raising money for not only enhancing the downtown commerce, but also the arts and supporting nonprofits. This is just in the downtown concert series, Downtown Sundown, we support nonprofits. So each month we raised money. First month was United Way. The second month was the Marine Raider Foundation. And then the third month was the Wilmington Arts Council of Wilmington and New Hanover County. So we are putting on an event and promoting downtown commerce and the arts. And the way this reads and has read, we were getting fined. So there was a precipitous to get this pushed forward to get removed so I wouldn't be getting fined. And here we are. And I would argue that this really is a bit of a correction because it really, without anyone knowing the history, how it went from 14 to 2. Again, we want to talk about arbitrarily changing numbers. Why did it go from 14 to 2? I've done my research. No one has an answer for that. So I would argue going from 2 to 20 isn't as big of an issue when you have this information given to you. I would also speak about the residents. I can't remember which commissioner spoke about that. I take great pride as a retired Marine Special Forces officer, a Marine Raider, in that I run a tight ship. I am very close with the police department. I call them up and check on them. One, we're dealing with other issues at that intersection. But I call after the concert series, hey, what complaints did you have? The only complaints or phone calls I ever had were me taking care of other issues. We run a tight ship. We do not have trash. We pick up afterwards. My team is tight. We're simply asking to put on an event. And we end at 10 o'clock. We don't push it to the 11 o'clock. We also get our permit from the police for the sound noise variance. So not only we are here to do the right things for the right reasons. And I'm asking for this to get promoted and, recommended approval to change that so I can and not worry about getting fined. I have events coming up. We have the concert series. We celebrate our anniversary party. We do Zombie Fest, a Halloween party in October. So we have a couple other events. I don't plan on getting close to 20, especially if that 13-week season can be one event. I just wanted to come forward and give some background and give some understanding to how this came, this evolution, because it's something that's directly affecting me right now. Not only operating a business, but also supporting downtown, supporting other businesses around me, and supporting some great nonprofits. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item number 6? Anyone here to speak on agenda item number 6? The public hearing is closed. Commissioner Adams.
I have a question, I guess, for staff. Can you provide any history on the sort of evolution of change for the decrease in the allowable number?
I do have a staff member who's looking back in the old code to see what that number was. They did acknowledge that this was reduced in the new code, and it was it was done in trying to be responsive to community concerns, and it was based on the complaints that we were receiving, and examples were given. I think one that Commissioner Pollack mentioned, the Seagate Bottle Shop, was one of those. Burnt Mill Creek was another, where we were getting a lot of complaints from the neighborhoods around those establishments about the impacts that they were experiencing with the outdoor events that were being held. So that's the genesis of why it was reduced in the code. I think it's also why, when this was put forward by, when Councilman Waddell approached staff and asked us to help in drafting this, what we put forward was something that, because it was limited to the central business district, we were comfortable with it. If this were something that we're extending to the other districts, we did have concerns, given that that was the genesis of why the number of temporary events had been reduced, was based on the impacts on those neighborhoods. And as I mentioned earlier, when you look at some of the districts, I think it's something, I know the comments received suggested that we really needed to increase this in all of the non-residential districts, or we needed to consider UMX and some other ones. And I think that's something that, if that's what the commission and the council would like us to do, we can explore that, understanding that we do have to look at those impacts and the difference for us between the central business district, besides the fact that you can do this as a permanent use right now. If you build a permanent stage, you could do this and we don't have any conditions or limitations on you. The other one is that when you look at that map, if you look, for example, at the UMX, which is the light purple or the lavender on the map on your screen, what you're going to see is that a lot of times follows corridors that are, so it's running down the major streets, right, with neighborhoods in between. And so those are some of the concerns, is how do we address that when you have that proximity of residentially zoned property? Because I think I think it was the chair who mentioned that if you have someone moving into the central business district, you're kind of moving in with an understanding of what you're moving into. Whereas if you're living in an R3 district or an R5 district, you're not expecting to have concerts, within a short distance of you on a frequent basis. So I think that to explain the genesis, both for the gentleman who spoke, the owner of Eagles Dare, but also for the commission, it really did come in trying to respond to community concerns. But from what staff has told me, those community concerns were generally based outside of the CBD.
this.
Commissioner Woodruff?
Linda, so this change 2 to 20, but it says in CBD only. So then you threw out a minute, R3 is subject to, they could have temporary outdoor events twice in a year.
R3 actually is not eligible because that's a residential district. So this is only for non-residential districts that we have that cap, so.
Okay, you threw out R3.
Yeah, oh, no, I was bringing out the R3 just to say, if you're a resident in an R3 district, it's a residential district, you're not expecting to have this kind of happening on a routine basis. And I did get an answer for the old code, and it's actually much higher than 14. And that was one of the community concerns, is that on the old code, our temporary uses were limited to no more than 60 days per year, unless you got a special use permit. So that is what so up until December of 2021, you could get a temporary use permit up to 60 days per calendar year. And if you wanted to go over that, there was a special use permit provision for it. And that, I think, was also part of the community concern, was that frequency.
How many permits would you get for that 60-day period? Unlimited? I mean, I got lost in, you're saying the 60-day period.
I'm saying that temporary uses, you could come in and request a temporary use up to 60 days in a calendar year. So that could be 60 different events using this table.
Okay. So we went from 60 to 2, and now we're trying to go back up to 20, potentially?
In one district, in just the one district.
Right.
Well, and we're looking at, we went down a few rabbit holes. We are looking at what's appropriate in this district. And knowing the character of the CBD and the support to economic development, which was brought up in the public hearing, and the character and the nature of the downtown area is very outdoors, music-oriented, and knowing that the small business owners are bringing people downtown to support the businesses, I have no problem supporting this, whether we pull it out or not. I think it's a good move for our city. Commissioner Woodruff?
Having heard the history, which I found nice to have, I mean, it's good. I understand where they're coming from. But having seen some of the comments, I don't know exactly where they are when they're saying, well, if they got it, why can't we get it? And I think that's a fair question to ask. I mean, we now know why they want it, and I don't have a problem saying they can have it. But if you've got somebody else who now is not going to have that same advantage to put on more events, I think they have a right to be heard. Whether that goes back to Danny's thought of this is not a correction, this is a modification. But that's just my thought. I think there's another party to be heard. So.
Commissioner Koffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I concur with Commissioner Woodruff's thoughts. Actually, I have a little line here that says an argument worth having, hearing all sides, but the CBD being sort of that niche riverfront flanked by the amphitheater and the pavilion and the clamshell, which is kind of a cool name, versus these other, purples and blues and whatnot that are next to R5, R7, and, right snuggled up to your house. It makes, I see why it's just shaved out for this, and, maybe the other business owners get some level of advocacy, which WDI gives the downtown zone, which I think is just to have an utmost respect for that in regards to just giving a voice to those commercial owners. I'm in favor of it. I say it goes up to Luke, and if they got problems, they can sort it out up at their level, but that's my 2 cents.
Commissioner Pollack?
Yeah, I now having a good understanding of the history and, from both the citizens and then, Linda's clarification of the history and all that as well. I am inclined to support this too, but I'm also, in deference to Commissioner Adams, we need to be better about if we're going to bring just a syntax change or something forward. There's a process to bring these, and I realize this feels like it's kind of a one-time lumping some things together to get them into a cycle, but we probably should in the future separate them out and, bring them up that way, but I'm inclined to support this.
All right, any discussion on the other amendments in agenda item 6?
I mean, I kind of keep going back to a little more conversation on the definition of studio. So that's going to become a permitted by right. If you want to open a studio, you can, once this definition's in place.
It does not affect where this is permitted. We already have studios that are listed in our use tables that identify the districts in which they're permitted and under what conditions. We have had some requests for clarification from our zoning staff when people come in with different uses as to whether or not it falls under a studio, it falls under that use. And we realized when those questions came up that we didn't actually, while it's listed in our table of uses, we didn't define it. And so we are putting forward the definition to provide clarity so that when folks come in and say, I want to do a studio and this is what I'm doing, we have the ability to say, okay, yes, that is an actual studio under the definition.
Follow up to that, without looking at the table, is studio under as P as in Paul, or is it C as in Charlie? Is it permitted as a by any of these zones?
It would depend on the district, I believe, and unfortunately, I don't have the land development code up in front of me.
I have portions of it, but yes, it's broken out as a use, as a studio, performing art, fine art, dance, or martial arts. So
Just as a definition, or as a
as a use.
As a use.
As a use. So that is lumped in, but there's no definition for what it meant by the term studio. So we're adding.
As a use, though, is that a conditional use or a permitted use?
It depends on the district.
Depends on the district.
Right.
Okay. Does a tattoo studio count as an artistic place of? I have tattoos. I'm not.
I believe that is a different use category.
But a parlor?
I believe, is that under personal?
I believe it's a personal service. use.
Personal service, okay. That's really the only point of clarification I needed. Thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
Going back to I'm going to say the noble inheritance of the concert series. When these events were hosted, I'm going to say in a city right away or on public land, which I think they were in the street originally, was this not an issue anymore? And it wasn't until events like the downtown series got transferred to private land that this became part of the problem?
They had 60. They were permitted to do 60 at the time.
Was it a number thing or where they occurred?
That I'm not sure. So I can try and get that answer. I don't know the answer to that. We can definitely look into that for you in terms of whether it made a difference, whether it was on public property or private property. There were 60 per year that were allowed. So if it fell within that, and we typically, I also want to say this goes by property. So that's the other piece of this, is that we're going by location in terms of the number of events per year based on the location itself. And I do have an answer for you. It applied to both. So the temporary use permits did apply to our public property as well.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no more discussion, what is the will of the commission on agenda item 6?
Madam Chair, I would like to inquire or request if the commissioners would be open to an amendment of accepting item number 6 with the exception of proposed amendment 3.
Yeah, we can't, I guess we can take everybody's temperature. My vote is the same for either, so the procedure, I understand your point about that, and I think the point was received well. But my vote would be the same either way, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I would support the proposition, because I think we need more information, but I think there's an entity out there that needs to be heard. And I mean, if we want to go ahead and approve this one, I can live with that. And my thought to those out there who wrote in saying, well, why not us? You know, there's a way to get in here just like these good folks got in here to ask their own, you know, change and that kind of thing. It can be done. I hate to put all that on them because it's going to be a smaller effort than these folks. This was big and they did well. So I can go either way, but I want those people out there who want to be heard know that they can be heard and that a change can be made if it can be proven to be what's appropriate to do. We just don't know what it is as we sit here.
Commissioner Cofer?
From a procedural standpoint, I would be more comfortable voting for these one at a time, and then as a recommendation, moving however it moves to council, that, is it item 3, perhaps broken out, carved out as its own standalone public hearing? Is that procedurally allowed? I don't know.
Ms. Painter?
One of the things that we actually have been requested to do for the council is to split these out into different ordinances, because the last couple of rounds that we have brought through, when they've had issues with one of the amendments in a package, it's gotten messy as they've tried to deal with that. So they've already asked us to try and split these up into different ordinances, as that makes sense. So my understanding was we can present all of them in one hearing, but they're going to vote on them separately so that we can bring them to them as separate actions. I do just want to clarify something with regards to the permits. I misunderstood a message I received. So the public concerts did not require zoning permits from us. They did require permits through community services. But we did receive complaints for both the private events and the public concerts, if that helps. So,
Complaints you received?
yes, we received complaints regarding the noise impacts, regardless of whether it was a private event or if it was a public event. So.
All right. So, Mr. Attorney, how would you like us to do a motion to separate and then vote on each? Or take a vote for all except and then vote on the
From what I'm
Amendment 3?
hearing Ms. Painter say, that seems to be the preference of council, is for it to be presented as separate items. Am I correct?
Yes, and I think we're still trying to figure out how separate they are. So, for example, can we put the grammatical ones together in one ordinance? But I would definitely say that the ones that are more substantive, we will be pulling those out and doing them as separate ordinances.
For council?
Yes.
So,
So
so do we, okay, so
I
if we.
think if they're comfortable saying, if item 3, amendment 3 is the one that you want to have as a separate vote, I think, and everybody's.
I guess I'm saying, am I taking 3 votes or 2 votes? Do we vote to take it out, then vote on one, then vote on the other? Or do we just vote on the one without and then vote on the other?
Two votes?
Yeah.
I think 2 votes.
Okay.
It will work.
I was hoping
Will
you'd
get
say
us to the
2.
same point.
But
Okay.
we're not taking 10, so just so everybody knows, that's, we're not considering that. All right, I think if we don't have any other comments, I will ask Commissioner Adams to make his.
I'd like to make an amendment for us to remove item 3 from a consideration.
You could move to approve all of them except Amendment 3.
Let's do
Is
that instead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Vote system. All right, Commissioner Adams has moved to approve item 6 with the exception of Amendment 3.
And I'll second that.
And Commissioner Cofer with the second. Is there further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. All right, and what are we doing with
So your
Number
item 3, you, Madam Chair, would entertain,
3.
I'll make a motion on that one, standalone.
And take my notes. All right, Commissioner
Okay with
Koffer?
that? Would I be reading this? Do I need to read this? It comes in the blue folder.
We didn't read the consistency statement in, did we?
You did not, probably should have.
Okay. So, I'm sorry to ask you to repeat your motion. We'll use the consistency statement for agenda item 6 without amendment 3.
Thank you. I'd make a motion to approve agenda item 6, various amendments and cleanup items to the Land Development Code. This reasonable is with the following amendment, exclusion of item 3. This request is reasonable and consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The Commission considers its approval to be reasonable in the public interest because the proposed amendments will correct minor errors and correct issues discovered during implementation of the Land Development Code and help reinforce the overall goals of the comprehensive plan by promoting economic development. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
Thank you. Commissioner Adams has moved to approve agenda item 6 without amendment 3. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
By Commissioner Koffer. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. The motion passes 5-0. Commissioner Koffer?
All right, and now I will move to approve agenda item number 6, 3.3, Amendment 3, Article 3, Sections 18-229 and 18-230, Temporary Use Standards. The Planning Commission believes this request is reasonable and consistent with the objectives and policies found in the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The proposed amendment will correct errors and issues discovered during implementation of the Land Development Code and help reinforce the overall goals of the comprehensive plan by promoting economic development, and therefore the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
I second.
Thank you. Commissioner Koffer moves to approve Amendment 3 of Agenda Item 6, and we have a second by Commissioner Pollock. Any further discussion?
You got to help me out here. I thought Danny just did everything but 3.
Right.
He
So
did.
now we're doing 3
Now we're doing 3.
Why'd we pull it out? He approved everything but 3 now.
for procedure, I think, or maybe he wants to vote against it. He might want to vote against
The motion
it.
is to approve 3 now.
Right. The motion is to approve Amendment 3, so
Why did we pull it out of that one?
it's either for procedural or he wants to vote against it.
Okay.
But we already proved that, so.
I got you. Okay, now, go ahead.
Okay. All right. All in favor of the motion to approve Amendment 3 of Agenda Item Number 6, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2 with Commissioners Adams and Wood voting against. All right. That is the end of our agenda items. Do we have any items from Commission?
Yes, I have 2. And one is just, actually, this is the more important, so I have 1. I've been asked to, in the spirit of the fact that we are, tonight is Commissioner Lyle's last meeting, I've been asked by Commissioner Lennon to read the following into the record. And it goes as follows. It says, the City of Wilmington is losing a valuable asset as Chairman Lyle completes her 2nd term on the Wilmington Planning Commission. Her leadership as our chairman over the past 4 years has been exemplary, and she is the best example I can think of a citizen servant. Her dedication to the planning process, to the development of the Land Development Code, to the concept of workforce affordable housing, and to all the citizens of Wilmington cannot be overstated. She has been fair and open-minded at all times, and respectfully firm when it was called for. I have truly appreciated her contribution and leadership over the years and consider myself lucky to have benefited from her mentorship. Godspeed. And I might add, you will be missed.
Thank you. That was very kind. It's been an honor to be part of the Planning Commission and to learn from all of you all, staff and other commissioners, and I am grateful for the opportunity to serve the citizens. I am madly in love with Wilmington, and it's been a joy and honor and challenge, all the things, to serve in this capacity. So thank you. Items from the staff.
Just to let you know, was City Council last night, had a few public hearings. I will say the item on McRae was continued to September. However, they did approve the conditional district for Switchyard, and they have opted to hold a public hearing on the recommended street closure. So they did approve that resolution of intent to close. We did provide your recommendation as well as staff's, and they want to hear from the public. So that's the reason for moving that forward. They want the opportunity to hear from the community on that request. They also had a public hearing on 1320 Independence Boulevard and the mixed-use project, and they did vote to approve a change in zoning, but not to the original O&I district with a commercial district mixed use. They opted to instead go with an MD-17 district, which would remove the commercial component from that project. And that is all we have from staff.
All right. Well, without any other items, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Pollock. Do we have a second?
Before we second it, Madam Chair, it has been a pleasure serving with you, and I'm sure you'll be here next week to reign over the leadership change, but yeah, good luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
A second.
Second from Commissioner Kofer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Last time. Meeting is adjourned.